debate. Is that 10 minutes and 3 minutes same apply? So I propose that we apply the same time limits. Of course, if you can be shorter, we would very much appreciate that. The rapporteur in total has got 10 minutes, and anyone who wishes to intervene has got 3 minutes. We'll start now with the first one, Rapporteur Mr. Frank Schwabe. Frank, you have the floor. Microphone, Frank. You have to put your mic on, please. Frank, we still don't hear you. Maybe if you could reconnect, it'll take us 30 seconds, but reconnect and let's hope that it works. Okay, Frank, you have the floor.
Can you hear me now?
Perfect.
Okay.
You can go ahead.
So, sorry, when I'm at home it works, when I'm in the parliament it don't work. But whatever. So, thank you very much, Mr. President. Ich werde auf Deutsch reden. Wir haben ja die letzte Plenary Session gehabt im Januar dieses Jahres, also schon lange vorbei. Und das Ziel ist es natürlich, so schnell wie möglich uns wieder physisch zu treffen, dass wir alle miteinander auch entsprechend ins Gespräch kommen. In der Zwischenzeit allerdings ist es notwendig, uns vorzubereiten dafür, dass unsere Organisation umfassend handlungsfähig bleibt. Und das schließt zum Beispiel auch entsprechende Wahlen mit ein. Mit diesem Report schaffen wir dafür die Voraussetzung, dass wir auch in einem Videomodus oder in einem hybriden Modus tagen. Aber nochmal, das Ziel ist natürlich, so schnell wie möglich wieder zusammenzukommen und uns entsprechend auch in Straßburg zu treffen. Wir haben sichergestellt, dass technisch die Voraussetzungen geschaffen werden. Darüber habe ich mich verständigt und unterhalten, auch mit denjenigen, die dafür zuständig sind in unserer Organisation. Es ist eine Herausforderung, das zu tun, habe ich gelernt, aber es wird alles wahrscheinlich möglich sein. Wir können davon ausgehen, dass, wenn wir die Regeln hier entsprechend ändern, wir nach diesen neuen Regeln auch entsprechend tagen können. Wie wollen wir tagen oder wie können wir tagen? Erstens, also physisch, das ist weiterhin das Präferierte. Zweitens in einem Videoformat, also wie jetzt, remotely. Und die dritte Möglichkeit ist eine hybride Form des Tagens. Diese hybride Form des Tages sollte aber nicht das sein, was wir anstreben. Wir sollten möglichst ein Level Playing Field haben, aber diese Version ist eingefügt, um vorzubeugen, dass es möglicherweise den Missbrauch geben könnte, dass einige vielleicht auf die Idee kommen zu sagen, wir können aber alle nicht nach Straßburg kommen und man dieses auch sehr lange betreiben könnte, und um dem vorzubeugen, wenn es am Ende an 1, 2, 3 Staaten nur liegen würde, dann könnte man auch über eine solche hybride Form nachdenken. Ziel ist es ausdrücklich nicht. Wir werden, wenn wir den Bericht heute so verabschieden, und das ist mir nochmal besonders wichtig zu betonen, werden wir dann im Dezember im Büro, im Präsidium entsprechende Entscheidungen zu treffen haben, ob wir dann zum Beispiel in einer Videoform entsprechend tagen. Und wir werden auch zu entscheiden haben, wie Wahlvorgänge durchzuführen sind, ob wir das in Briefwahl machen oder in Form einer elektronischen Abstimmung. Ich würde auf jeden Fall aus Gründen der Praktikabilität und der Durchführbarkeit und der Schnelligkeit von Ergebnissen ein elektronisches Voting, eine elektronische Abstimmung auch bevorzugen und denke, das ist dann auch eine breite Meinung entsprechend in unserer Organisation. Was ich unterstreichen will, für uns schon mal alle, um uns da selber klar zu machen, um in unseren nationalen Parlamenten das klar zu machen, um das auch bei unseren Delegationskolleginnen und Kollegen klar zu machen. Wir müssen alles tun, uns prozedural, geschäftsordnungsmäßig auf diese Sitzung im Januar vorzubereiten. Wir müssen das aber für uns organisatorisch auch persönlich tun. Es wird nicht funktionieren, wenn die normalen Sitzungen in den nationalen Parlamenten alle parallel laufen. Das haben wir jetzt oftmals so getan. Ich selber auch. Ich sitze ja auch gerade hier in Berlin im Deutschen Bundestag. Aber ich bin mir sicher, wir werden keine vernünftige Sitzung im Januar organisieren können, wenn wir alles parallel machen. Eine ganze Woche miteinander vernünftig Ausschusssitzungen, Fraktionssitzungen, Berichte, wichtige Gäste, mit denen wir uns unterhalten wollen, zu empfangen und alles das gleichzeitig zu tun, neben dem Parlamentsablauf auf nationaler Ebene, das wird nicht gelingen. Also bitte, bitte richtet euch darauf ein, dass wir wirklich diese Woche auch, sagen wir mal, gedanklich nur für den Europarat vorbereiten. Das ist das, was wir jetzt heute tun können in der Geschäftsordnung. Und dann, wie gesagt, müssen wir es aber auch real am Ende umsetzen. Ich will mich zum Schluss nur noch äußern zur Frage der Praktikabilität und der Handlungsfähigkeit der Ausschüsse. Meine Hauptintention ist es, möglich zu machen, dass die Versammlung tagt in allen Formen, auch eben die Ausschüsse. Meine grundsätzliche Meinung ist, dass wir keine besonderen zusätzlichen Quoren brauchen. Das hat sich nicht als nicht praktikabel erwiesen in der einen oder anderen Ausschusssitzung, wo bestimmte Beschlüsse nicht gefasst worden sind in der Vergangenheit. Deswegen war mein ursprünglicher Vorschlag, und das ist ja auch nochmal in einem Amendment niedergelegt, dass wir gar keine Quoren mehr, jedenfalls keine zusätzlichen Foren für Videoformate haben. Ich habe aber gelernt, dass es dann doch Besorgnisse gibt von einigen, gar keine Form des Quorums mehr zu haben. Und deswegen wird es nachher einen Abänderungsvorschlag geben, nicht gar keine Quoren mehr zu haben, sondern runterzugehen von dem 1/3 auf 1/4. Nach dem, was ich mir angeguckt habe in den vergangenen Sitzungen der letzten Monate, wurde dieses 1/4 eigentlich immer erreicht. Und deswegen glaube ich, ist das ein praktikabler Kompromissvorschlag, mit dem eigentlich alle leben können müssten. Deswegen werde ich diesen Kompromissvorschlag jedenfalls meinerseits am Ende akzeptieren. Bis dahin vielen Dank für die Aufmerksamkeit.
Thank you, Frank. I now open the floor. Maybe one small remark. You are completely right when you say that come January or whatever other committee meeting, you should have your time dedicated exclusively to the Parliamentary Assembly, because otherwise, if you go on parallel activities, it just doesn't work. I open now the discussions. We start with the representatives of the political groups. First on my list for the Socialists, Democrats and Greens is Ms. Marina Berlingueri. You have the floor. But you need to request to speak, Marina. Okay, you've got the floor.
Ecco, sì, grazie. Avete ben compreso il nome, grazie. Sì, la pandemia ha avuto dei pesanti riflessi anche sull'attività della nostra Assemblea. Noi abbiamo saputo reagire prontamente, consentendo lo svolgimento di riunioni da remoto e assicurando comunque continuità ai lavori. È però innegabile che vi siano alcuni profili problematici. Innanzitutto, sostituendo le sessioni con le riunioni della Commissione permanente allargata, si è creato un problema di rappresentatività, perché possono votare soltanto i componenti della Commissione. Poi non siamo riusciti ad eleggere alcune cariche molto importanti per la vita del Consiglio d'Europa. Sono elezioni che abbiamo posticipato, ma adesso anche questa questione è diventata indifferibile. È quindi con grande soddisfazione che accogliamo il rapporto presentato da Schwabe, che introduce modifiche al regolamento per consentire all'Assemblea di tenere in circostanze eccezionali sedute plenarie in modalità ibrida o a distanza. È molto importante accogliere questa occasione per introdurre delle regole utili che mettano in salvo il funzionamento dell'istituzione anche in caso di problemi e emergenze future. Vorrei sottolineare due elementi che secondo me sono utili. Il primo, l'impianto del regolamento non viene alterato, affianca alla disciplina ordinaria una disciplina applicabile in situazioni eccezionali. L'altro elemento molto importante è che l'applicazione di queste norme speciali deve essere stabilita dal Bureau per tempi definiti, di volta in volta per le sessioni e per tempi precisi per le commissioni. Ecco, nel caso si scegliesse la modalità ibrida, sono perfettamente consapevole che le delegazioni che non potranno essere presenti fisicamente a Strasburgo avranno meno opportunità di relazione rispetto a coloro che saranno presenti. Però insomma le modalità di lavoro saranno le medesime sia per chi lavora da remoto che per chi lavora in presenza. Io quindi mi sento di poter rassicurare alcuni colleghi che nel corso dell'esame in Commissione Regolamento hanno espresso preoccupazioni circa la democraticità del nuovo sistema. Cioè, io credo che accettare le riunioni in modalità ibrida non indebolisca la nostra organizzazione, ma al contrario la rafforzi. Viviamo in un momento di grande emergenza e incertezza, abbiamo il dovere di dimostrare ai cittadini europei che svolgiamo pienamente il nostro compito e tutti preferiamo lavorare in presenza e incontrarci, però fino a quando questo non sarà possibile non dobbiamo bloccare l'istituzione e nemmeno subire i ricatti di facili strumentalizzazioni. Certamente è una sfida molto forte, molto importante. La proposta di Schwabe ci consente di raccoglierla in modo intelligente ed equilibrato. Per questo motivo tutto il gruppo socialista lo sostiene pienamente sia nelle indicazioni che per gli emendamenti che nelle raccomandazioni che ci ha fatto nella sua introduzione. Grazie.
Thank you very much. Now we go to the EPP. Andreas Nick. Andreas. You're on board, Andreas. You can have a go.
Hello. Thank you, Mr. President, dear colleagues. Ich bin sehr froh, dass wir heute über diesen Bericht beraten können. Ich war einer der ersten, glaube ich, der im Sommer, als absehbar war, dass wir auch im September, Oktober nicht zu unserem regulären Betrieb zurückkehren können, angemahnt hat, dass wir die Voraussetzungen dafür schaffen, dass wir auch unter den Online-Bedingungen unsere Arbeit weiter fortsetzen können. Wir haben in den Ausschüssen seit dem Frühjahr sehr effektiv auch online gearbeitet, inhaltlich, aber wir waren jetzt an dem Punkt, wo wir sicherstellen müssen, dass wir auch im kommenden Jahr, im Jahr 2021, unsere Versammlung wieder rekonstituieren können. Das machen wir jedes Jahr im Januar, um die Funktionsfähigkeit auch der Parlamentarischen Versammlung aufrechtzuerhalten. Und wir müssen sicherstellen, dass wir als Parlamentarische Versammlung unseren statuarischen Rechten und Pflichten als Organ des Europarates nachkommen können. Und das betrifft eben insbesondere die Wahlen zu den Richtern am Gerichtshof für Menschenrechte und die Wahlen der Funktionsträger des Europarates. Die können wir an kein anderes Gremium delegieren, anders als wir das bei Reports oder bei anderen Dingen tun können. Insofern ist dieser Bericht von zentraler Bedeutung für die zukünftige Handlungsfähigkeit der Versammlung und der ganzen Organisation. Ich danke Frank Schwabe und den Kollegen des Rules Committees, dass sie dies so vorbereitet haben und dass wir, wenn wir dies heute vollziehen, unter welchen Bedingungen auch immer im Januar unsere Versammlung auch im Plenarmodus zusammenrufen können und unseren statuarischen Rechten und Pflichten nachkommen können. Ich glaube, es ist besonders wichtig, dass wenn wir Wahlen durchführen, dass auch im Hybrid- oder im Online-Modus, dass sichergestellt ist, dass nur diejenigen, die wirklich wahlberechtigt sind, auch ihre Stimme abgeben und gleichzeitig, dass geheime Wahlen eben auch geheim durchgeführt werden können. Und dass insbesondere auch die Frage, dass wir keine gespaltene Verfahren durchführen, etwa bei einer Hybridsitzung zwischen denen, die physisch anwesend sind und denen, die online abstimmen, sondern wir müssen auch dort für ein Level Playing Field sorgen. Wenn wir das heute tun, haben wir, glaube ich, die besten Voraussetzungen dafür geschaffen, dass wir als Versammlung weiter auch unsere Aufgabe, unsere Funktion wahrnehmen können. Ich glaube, der Vorschlag, der von Frank Schwabe angekündigt ist, für ein reduziertes Quorum für die Ausschüsse, ist sachgerecht. Und auch ich würde unterstützen, wenn wir diesem Vorschlag nachher folgen, ebenso wie den ganzen Report heute so zu billigen, damit wir im Dezember entscheiden können über die praktische Umsetzung und im Januar in welcher geeigneten Form auch immer unter den pandemischen Voraussetzungen in Straßburg virtuell oder physisch zusammenkommen können. Vielen Dank.
Danke. Maintenant, on a la représentante de ALDE, Madame Nicole Fries. Nicole, vous avez la parole.
Oui, bonjour à tous et merci pour cette journée et pour ce rapport, cher Franck. On a effectivement besoin d'avoir cette réforme importante du règlement parce qu'on est obligé réellement d'adapter nos procédures sous peine de condamner l'Assemblée parlementaire à de l'immobilisme, tout simplement. Aussi, le groupe ALDE soutient le projet de résolution adopté par la Commission du règlement, qui est vraiment le fruit d'un travail sérieux et constructif. Et je félicite encore une fois Frank Schwab pour la qualité de ce rapport. Il nous faut envisager des séances plénières d'un type nouveau, parce qu'il est nécessaire effectivement de s'adapter. Il faut qu'on puisse débattre et procéder à des désignations qui n'ont que trop tardé. Comme beaucoup, je préférerais de loin que nous ayons la certitude de pouvoir, dans les semaines à venir, nous réunir comme avant à Strasbourg. Mais même si des signaux encourageants nous parviennent au sujet de la mise au point de vaccins, il serait inconséquent de nous en tenir pour de longs mois encore à une attente, à attendre gentiment, je dirais, une normalisation de la situation sanitaire en Europe. Les options ouvertes par la résolution adoptée à une large majorité sont peut-être pas enthousiasmantes, mais en tout cas, elles sont réalistes et pertinentes. Elles permettent d'entrevoir enfin une reprise en main par l'Assemblée parlementaire de ses prérogatives. Pour ce qui me concerne, et je ne suis pas la seule à le penser, la perspective de session hybride permettant la reprise même partielle de ce qui fait l'âme de notre Assemblée est l'option que nous devons privilégier. Elle ne conduira pas, contrairement à ce que l'on entend parfois, à la création de délégations à statut différencié, sauf à considérer qu'en temps normal, les membres présents et ceux ne venant pas à Strasbourg ont des statuts différents. Les modifications proposées permettront à tous d'exercer leur droit de parole et de vote, qu'ils soient à Strasbourg ou devant leur écran. Il s'agit vraiment d'un apport positif de la technologie à la continuité de la vie parlementaire. D'autant que nous montrons tous à l'identique, M. Schwab l'a évoqué en évoquant le vote électronique. Mes chers collègues, le choix qui nous est donné aujourd'hui est celui d'une alternative entre, d'une part, une adaptabilité à des circonstances particulières pour un temps donné, mais nécessaire au débat parlementaire, et d'autre part, un conservatisme procédural, synonyme d'immobilisme et de délégitimisation avec le temps, voire de disparition de ce que nous représentons. Je voudrais dire aussi à ce propos que je suis d'accord avec Franck sur le fait d'être vraiment à l'APCE, qu'on soit en présentiel ou en virtuel. Et je suis d'accord aussi sur le principe du quorum qui doit baisser lorsque nous avons des réunions virtuelles. Aussi, fidèles à nos principes au groupe ALDE, nous soutenons la volonté de faire fonctionner à nouveau l'APCE sur des bases collégiales et délibératives, tout en nous adaptant au contexte sanitaire. Nous voterons bien sûr cette résolution et nous remercions encore Franck pour ce qu'il a écrit là. Merci.
Merci, Nicole. We now move to the European Conservatives. Ian Littlegranger. Ian, you've got the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. This has been fascinating just listening to my colleagues. First thing I'd like to say is that I think anybody who's a parliamentarian would like to come to Strasbourg in January. One of the biggest problems we will face is at the moment all British MPs and peers are banned from travelling, not by the government, but by the Speaker of the House of Commons, and therefore at this precise moment it would be impossible for us to come, which means that we would like to be there, but we can't, which means that the hybrid system for us is basically the only way forward. Now, there is nothing in what Frank has put forward that parliaments are by and large not doing. Most parliaments are voting online, most parliaments are doing committees online, most parliaments are actually doing the job of the parliament online, as we at the moment seem to be doing as well. I come on to the voting because the voting is crucial. We do have 2 sets of votes, well 3 technically, which we've got to get through. Now, I would thank Wojciech and others for making sure this happens. It is nothing clever about this. There are plenty of ways of doing it. It isn't difficult, and therefore I'm delighted we're going to have it. Also on the format in the future, there is no guarantee, as Madame Truss said, that the virus will be ready in time for anything. It is going to take an enormous amount of time to vaccinate enough people across Europe to make this worthwhile. So if we set up the parameters now, it means that whatever happens in the future, it can be January, it can be the next session in April, at least we have an opportunity to have some sort of realism in this. And I think that's the most important thing, because the quorum and all the rest of it is right. I don't have any problems with this. But I think the most important is give the flexibility to parliamentarians. None of us have a crystal ball, Mr. President. If you'd said to any of us in February this year, would we be in this position? Of course we would say, no, absolutely not a chance. We'll just carry on doing what we're doing. Look at us now. You cannot believe in that small amount of time, everything that we have tried to work for through democracy, through rule of law, etc., has changed so dramatically in that period of time. And therefore, I would say that this is absolutely right. But please don't, Mr. President, or anyone else, just presume that countries who want to be there and can't be are using it as an excuse not to be. I'm afraid that's not always the case, and certainly not in the case of us. And therefore, flexibility must be there to be able to do both systems. There's nothing clever about this, but actually, at the end of the day, if there is political will, the Secretariat under Wojciech can supply it, and the rooms and all the spaces are there safely to do so, then we must have that flexibility. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Jan. Obviously, we will welcome whoever of our colleagues who can and is allowed to come to be here. And maybe just one small detail, the rules we're making are for the exceptional situation. So from the moment we do not have an exceptional situation, we go physical full-fledged. I'm saying this because I wish to avoid that at the end of the day, in the future, we might have a situation where certain delegations would like to be in a hybrid mode, although it's not necessary. This being said, we have now United Left. Tinny Cox. Tinny, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, and great to see you, at least, Mr. President, there in the hemicycle. We all envy you, and we want to be with you as soon as possible. Let me first compliment ourselves for all the good work done in the past months of this year under your presidency, Mr. President, and with the tremendous support and hard and creative work of our Secretary General and the whole of his team. And my compliments also include our committees, and especially our committee chairs and their excellent staff who managed to do our work in times of COVID-19. That's a great thing. Well done. I say to everybody, congratulations, Mr. President. Nevertheless, it's now time to look forward as well, and therefore we have to modify our rules of procedure with regard to hybrid or remote meetings of our Assembly and its committees. Proposals are presented by Mr. Schwabe, and we, as the UEL group, fully adhere to his proposals. The same goes for the additional modification of some rules proposed by Madam Schouw. We too do endorse her proposals wholeheartedly. I thank both rapporteurs for the work done in such a short time, being so creative and so practical. That deserves our applause, I think. At the end of the debate, I intend to propose, Mr. President, an oral sub-amendment to the only amendment made with regard to Mr. Schwabe's resolution, and that oral sub-amendment intends to lower the quorum from 33, which is at this moment our rule, to a 25%. I'm very happy that Mr. Schwabe is agreeing to this proposal. This proposal will be made by me on behalf of the whole of the Presidential Committee. We reached, I think, a practical agreement on this. That being said, Mr. President, I hope we will endorse, if possible, unanimously these two resolutions. Thank you very much.
Okay, we now move on to the colleagues. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 on my list. May I request to our colleagues that in the future, as from now, please inscribe yourselves before the last speaker of the political groups that will facilitate the functioning. So the speakers list is now 7 people. First on the list is Madame Schouw. Madame Schouw, you have the floor.
Thank you, President and colleagues. COVID-19 has once again shown fragile democracy, rule of law, and also human rights are. As in wars and other crises past, we see fundamental values and also principles being challenged. We have seen political leaders using the ongoing crisis to extend their power and also influence, sidestepping democratic processes. And we have also seen basic human rights, such as freedom of expression and assembly, being challenged and limited, explained by the need to protect public health. We also have seen that in times of crisis, the work of the Council of Europe as watchdog of democracy is of utmost importance. And President, it is therefore our duty to do what we can to enable the Assembly to meet in plenary and ensure that the organization is able to fulfill its statutory obligations. And due to the exceptional circumstances of COVID-19, the Assembly has not met in the plenary since last January, and the modifications of the rules of procedures are proposed by Mr. Schwabe in his report will enable the Assembly to hold remote or hybrid plenary sessions in January, as well as under extraordinary situations in the future. With the adoption of Mr. Schwabe's report, we are well on our way to open the 2021 session in January, and hence also elect judges to the court, as well as high-ranking officials of the Council of Europe. I congratulate Mr. Schwabe on his excellent work. As chair of the Rules Committee, I have witnessed great dedication from him and our secretariat, a clear focus on detail, and the utmost respect for the serious and complicated nature of the questions at hand. I strongly encourage you to vote in favor of Mr. Schwabe's draft resolution. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Madam Schouw. We now move to, we've got some interference here. Okay, we now move to Mr. Kislyak. You have the floor.
Алло. Спасибо, господин председатель. Я постараюсь кратко. Я тоже благодарен господину Швабу за большую работу по подготовке новых исключительных правил ведения нашей работы. Но у меня есть несколько больших сомнений, которые лично мне бы не позволили поддержать эти правила в том виде, как они изложены. Во-первых, мы находимся действительно в исключительной ситуации, которая требует исключительных методов работы. Мы худо-бедно выработали понимание, как мы в этих условиях можем работать. Но смущает меня то, что в докладе и в проекте резолюции заложена идея, что именно вот эти правила теперь могут быть использоваться для любой чрезвычайной ситуации, причем определение чрезвычайной ситуации чрезвычайно широкое. Оно включает и природные катастрофы, и политические беспорядки, и акты терроризма. Так я хотел бы подчеркнуть вот особенность нынешней чрезвычайной ситуации, что мы все находимся почти в одинаковых условиях. И с точки зрения угроз, которые мы все переживаем, и с точки зрения способности передвигаться, в том числе передвигаться в Страсбург. Для этой ситуации нынешние правила более или менее, я считаю, работающими. Второе, гибридный метод работы у меня вызывает большое сомнение с точки зрения способности этого метода обеспечить равные права работы для каждого из членов нашей организации, будь то присутствующих в зале, будь то работающих по удаленному режиму. Вот мы уже третий раз в комитетах, в беседах с вами, господин председатель, на вашей встрече с главными делегациями обсуждали вопрос голосования. И каждый раз я слышу другой вариант того, как будет обеспечиваться голосование. И эта беда, она проистекает из доклада, где не заложен принцип обеспечения равенства участия членов нашей организации, будь то в гибридной, будь то в удаленной или любой другой форме работы, на которой мы согласимся. И третий пункт, который меня вызывает большую озабоченность, это нынешнее предложение понизить требования к кворуму, потому что и так легитимность и качество принимаемых решений в нынешних чрезвычайных условиях снижается, мы все это понимаем. А при понижении кворума оно упадет еще больше, и мы все будем выглядеть не слишком убедительно для наших избирателей. Спасибо.
Thank you, Mr. Kizdiak. We now go to Lobase. Richard, you've got the floor.
Yeah, I think at last she gets online. Can I say firstly that we're in a transition phase, and at the beginning of next year we might still face a situation in which different countries have different rules, both for travel and for quarantining after travel. So we have to look at a transition period, and that means that some people will take part remotely and others will be able to be there. Now, we've handled this situation in the House of Lords for the last few months, and it can be made to work, and you can get a remote voting system that works. And I think we have to concentrate on having an interim system, shall we say. If I could make one positive suggestion, if we're going to sit people in the chamber, are we going to have a distance between them which is greater than it is at the moment? If so, I wonder whether the Secretary General would like to talk to the European Parliament, because their hemicycle is almost twice the size of ours. And it could be that it would be possible to get many more people in there with a greater distance. And before we get too proud of things, could I remind members that the European Parliament met in the Council of Europe chamber right up until the turn of the century. So there is a precedent. And the next point I'd like to make is that some people will want a shield longer than others. And I think we have to allow a certain amount of discretion, certainly in the first meeting or two, that people can choose whether they take part in a hybrid or other sense. I'm fairly clear that the Speaker of the House of Lords, if there was going to be a meeting in Strasbourg of the Council, would allow our part of the UK delegation to attend. I know that he feels rather frustrated with the whole business, but clearly he wants to keep things going. And my very final point Lord Simon Russell, who is one of our delegation, has been taking charge of looking at overseas procedure during the pandemic. And I'm sure if needed, he would be very happy to talk to the authorities of the Council about practice in other countries, that is, if you don't already have the information. Thank you.
Thank you. We now move to our next speaker, which is Alexander Pojcik. Alex, you've got the floor.
Thank you, President. Many things for Frank. This is very quick, excellent work. Of course, possible due to excellent work of the staff of the committee. I must also underline the excellent cooperation of the Presidential Committee and the excellent atmosphere which allows us to react quickly. I was probably the first one during the Presidential Committee as the President of EPP to put forward this idea of hybrid meeting. Of course, I fully support this report and the ideas that we can find in this report. Of course, as Rick just underlined, of course, this shall be the ultimate and temporary remedy, but we have to have it. For that reason, I call to all parliamentarians to do all efforts in their respective countries to make everything to allow as many as possible parliamentarians to come to Strasbourg. That also, and this is probably the call to our German colleagues, is to allow anybody who wishes to go to Strasbourg by car to allow him to go there. I must underline once again that, for example, in Poland, because I heard what our British colleagues and our Russian colleagues are saying, but any holder of diplomatic passport can travel without any restriction. Just a few days ago, we had a summit of European Union, and it was absolutely not a problem to gather people who are running European Union to gather together, because this is so important. And human rights and democracy, it's as important as the economy and the political decisions. We shall gather together physically, everybody who can. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Alex. We now have Antonio Gutierrez. Antonio, tienes la palabra.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. I would like to speak in Spanish. En estos momentos de crisis, todos los parlamentos nacionales hemos ido tomando medidas que nos posibiliten que sigamos funcionando en nuestra labor parlamentaria y, por lo tanto, la Asamblea Parlamentaria del Consejo de Europa no podía ser menos. La tarea que le hemos encomendado a Frank no era una tarea fácil, la modificación de nuestro reglamento para continuar con nuestro trabajo. Y creo que el resultado, quiero felicitarle, porque es magnífico. Yo creo que es una propuesta equilibrada, juiciosa y muy ordenada, y que nos permitirá pues seguir con el funcionamiento y desarrollo de nuestro trabajo en la Asamblea. Pero también en nombre de la delegación española me gustaría hacer una petición. Sé que en el informe se suspende la posibilidad de hacer traducción simultánea en otras lenguas, además de las lenguas oficiales y las lenguas de trabajo. Soy consciente que además es son problemas técnicos, pero me gustaría también que hiciéramos lo posible y avanzar para que esto fuera para que pudiéramos conseguir la traducción simultánea en otras lenguas, porque nos permitiría también avanzar en esa normalidad a la que queremos acercarnos. Por lo demás, deciros que la delegación española va a apoyar con entusiasmo la propuesta de modificación de estos reglamentos y de nuevo agradecer a Frank y a la Comisión la labor realizada. Muchas gracias.
Muchas gracias, Antonio. We now have Piero Fassino. Piero, you have the floor.
Sì, anche io.
We lost your image.
Pronto, mi ascoltate? Sì.
Yeah, perfect. You can go ahead.
Allora vorrei ringraziare anch'io Frank, che ha fatto veramente un eccellente lavoro. Ora, è evidente che tutti noi vorremmo fare l'assemblea in presenza quanto prima e auspichiamo di poterla fare a gennaio. Tuttavia, la cosa non sta nelle nostre mani. La cosa sta nella dinamica dell'epidemia. È evidente che se l'epidemia procede ai ritmi di oggi, noi non siamo sicuri che a gennaio ci siano le condizioni per partecipare all'assemblea e quindi dobbiamo avere una flessibilità. Io penso che le proposte che Frank ha avanzato sono molto opportune, adeguate, tengono conto di un'eccezionalità di situazione e per alcuni aspetti correggono anche strutturalmente dei limiti del nostro lavoro e quindi io credo che ci si debba attenere a queste proposte e si debba, con la sufficiente flessibilità, fare in modo che l'attività del Consiglio continui a funzionare, come il Presidente, lo ringrazio, si è sforzato di assicurare in questi mesi e in relazione agli eventi poi valutare se siamo in grado di convocare in presenza l'Assemblea oppure se dobbiamo andare a una convocazione che adotti un sistema ibrido e che consenta a chi può di esserci e a chi non può attraverso con dei collegamenti digitali di esserci lo stesso. L'unico dubbio, non è una certezza, l'unico dubbio che ho riguarda l'abbassamento del quorum delle decisioni, perché l'abbassamento del quorum rischia di offrire destro a chi le vuole contestare. Se un Paese membro del Consiglio d'Europa viola i diritti umani e noi assumiamo una risoluzione diciamo in qualche modo di riprovazione o comunque di censura che lo invita a rispettare i diritti umani e a cambiare i suoi comportamenti ed è assunta con un quorum che non è la maggioranza dell'Assemblea, l'autorità di quel governo avrà facile destro a dire che questa risoluzione non ci interessa e noi non siamo vincolati a rispettarla perché non ha neanche la maggioranza dell'Assemblea che l'ha espressa. Quindi in questo senso la questione del quorum io la valuterei ancora molto molto attentamente, verificando esattamente come si possa garantire che le nostre decisioni abbiano un forte valore e nessuno le possa contestare nella loro legittimità e al tempo stesso però certo tenere conto del fatto che assumiamo queste decisioni in un regime più complicato anche dal punto di vista dei numeri. Quindi chiederei solo un supplemento di Franca di tutti a questo punto. Oggi la risoluzione io credo sarà approvata, mi auguro che sia approvata, contiene delle proposte molto utili, quindi dobbiamo approvarla. Verifichiamo sul quorum ancora se ci sono delle altre modalità con cui attenuare il rischio che io ho evocato. Grazie Presidente.
Grazie Piero. We now go to Madam Stienen. Petra, you have the floor.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. As the leader of the Netherlands delegation, I am very pleased with the work of Frank Schwabe and Mrs. Schau. I think this is really giving us almost a roadmap for the next coming months. I hope it's not longer than the next coming months. In Arabic, there's a beautiful saying that says, trust in God, but tie your camel. So I think we are really working with a very good basis to be secure that we can continue our important work. And many speakers before me have complimented the team in Strasbourg, the rapporteurs, and I would also extend my compliments to you, Mr. President, the team, the Secretary General, all the interpreters, because what a task you have and had over the past couple of months and will in the next coming months. So Corona Volente, we will be able to meet, hopefully in a hybrid form. I think that's the maximum we can achieve for. There are two issues which are of concern to my delegation. Like in the UK, in our parliament, the Speaker of Parliament has issued a decree that members of Parliament are not allowed to travel under the present circumstances. Members of the Senate are allowed to travel for necessary travel. So we will benefit from a hybrid solution. And I think, Mr. President, it might be helpful if after we have accepted both the draft resolutions, if maybe you can inform the speakers of our parliaments about this decision and encourage them to be as flexible as possible in allowing the members of our parliaments to travel. It might be helpful for us also as delegation leaders to negotiate space for our maneuvering space for our delegation members. Thank you.
Thank you, Petra. I'll definitely will reach out to the speakers of the parliaments and urge them to allow the members to head out to Strasbourg. Last on my list at this stage is Roger Gale. Roger, you got the floor.
Thanks very much, Government. Congratulations to Frank. He's done a tremendous amount of work, and I'm now going to have to disagree with some of it. It surprises me, it's probably the first and it may be the last time it's ever happened, to say that Frank has managed to unite myself and Mr. Kislyak. I am concerned about the qualification of four exceptional circumstances, and I think that one of the things that we need to look at is putting a sunset clause into this so that it is applicable for the pandemic. But not necessarily all ongoing, although of course we can learn from the experience. My second concern relates to the hybrid meeting in January. Mr. President, if I could have your attention please as well, I don't think that there is a reasonable chance of a lot of us being able to attend Strasbourg in January. I'm concerned about the fact that if we do, and people come from all over the wider Europe, to Strasbourg, what happens if, as happened to you when you went to Moscow, there is an outbreak of COVID within the delegation? Is the entire assembly going to be quarantined? How are you going to handle this? And if a lot of people decide they can turn up and do turn up, how are you going to socially distance in a chamber that is too small already anyway? I'm not certain that this is going to work, and I agree with Piero Fassino. I think we have to maintain flexibility and be prepared to say, and not be too grand to say, actually, we can't do this physically in January, in the hope and expectation that with vaccinations, we might be able to do it in April. But I think we have to be ready to pull the plug in January. Of course, we have to work at the moment as has been. We're not funded for travel. And the final issue, and again, I agree with Mr. Kislyak on this and others who've spoken, I don't believe we should lower the quorum. I do think that would be a retrograde step, and I think we must maintain the quorum as it is. With those fairly severe caveats, I nevertheless thank Frank, and I hope that we can make some, if not all of this work. Thank you.
Thank you, Sir Roger. It's always nice to see that the Council of Europe allows people to agree, even you and Mr. Kislyak. Lovely. Maybe a few remarks on the sunset clause. It is indeed in there because the Bureau has to decide at every instance which mode of convening will be used. So it is basically a continuous sunset clause in there for the simple reason, again, the Bureau has to decide at any instance. Outbreak of COVID in Russia. Just for the information of the colleagues, there was a suspicion of potential infection of one of the Russian colleagues. but he proved to be twice negative afterwards, so it was like false alarm. But again, it is right for you to mention it. In terms of how safe, between brackets, is it to come down here? Well, I don't know whether we can show the hemicycle, and you would see that the social distancing is already organized. There is a pre-testing for any colleague and staff coming in. So basically, you would have to have a test before you would be allowed into the meetings. And the test obviously had to be negative. And heading back home, we offer again a test in order to comfort home base that you didn't get anything down here. Is it 100% foolproof? Nothing is. But again, these are the elements that we are working on and already in place, but we will give you more information coming January. The speakers list, as far as I can see, is completed. So now I have the rapporteur, Frank Schwabe, to respond. Frank, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. I hope you can hear me. So I would like to thank all of you. That's maybe not the most important report in our assembly, but for sure it's a necessary report because it brings us into the situation to deal with the COVID-19 situation, whatever will happen. And I'm quite sure that we will not misuse it. So it was especially Mr. Kislyak who raised some concerns about it. I think there's no risk of misusing it. For sure, I would like to say as well, thank you to the president, to the chairs, to the secretariats, all the staff, the interpreters. We do it very well in this specific situation. And there are other international organizations who have more problems to proceed with their work. And like Alex and others mentioned, I would like to thank the Presidential Committee as well to get an agreement on this, including the question of the quorum. We just try to balance it between those one who think like me, we should not have any quorum in a special quorum in a remote meeting, and others who think we should have it quite high. So I think 25%, 1/4 is really a good compromise that let us work very well due to the experience we could have in the last months. Yeah, this is Mr. Kislyak raised some concerns. I mentioned it already, but I really think we will not misuse it. So I think it's not too broad what we describe as an extraordinary situation. I think if there would be really a majority to misuse this to have a kind of remote meeting when it's not necessary, then we have other problems with this organization when there would be a majority for this. About the quorum, I spoke already. It's based, I think, just on an experience of the last months to make it possible to work and to prevent a kind of misuse. A lot, and it was Piero mentioned as well. About Lord Balfe, you spoke about the EU Parliament. For sure, Wojciech, the Secretary General and others always prove it, but the problem is we are always depending on a decision from the EU Parliament, not from the President of the Parliament there. And at the end, we should try to be in a way independent as possible. If it's necessary in a specific situation, I think we are prepared to check it for sure. And you spoke about the health situation of some members, and for sure for this we provide as well a kind of hybrid meeting possibility. About the sunset, I think the president clarified already. Roger Gale mentioned it. So Roger, we have already a kind of sunset situation because we have always to decide new on the question if the next plenary session should be in a remote way or just in a normal way like before. So at the end, again, thank you so much, and I hope we can agree as well on the question of 1/4. So then we will have a very broad agreement in our standing committee. And again, thank you very much.
Thank you, Frank. Does the chairperson of the committee wish to add something? Madam Skau, do you wish to have the floor? Oscar, you have the floor, 3 minutes max.
I need only a minute, I think. Mr. President, Mr. Schwab has done excellent work on this complex report dealing with a very complex issue. The report has been debated twice in the committee, and Mr. Schwab has been met with strong support of the great majority of committee members. Adopting this report is crucial for us to fulfill our statutory obligations as we enter into 2021, and as chairs of the Rules Committee, I strongly encourage you to vote in favor of the draft resolution. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The debate is closed. Go. Thank you. The debate is closed. We shall now proceed to the vote. I would like to remind our colleagues around the virtual table that only members of the Standing Committee are entitled to vote. We are in the amendment to the draft resolution document 15178. The Committee on Rules of Procedure, Immunities and Institutional Affairs presented a draft resolution to which one amendment, and only one, has been tabled. You have this in your compendium. I remind you that speeches on amendments are limited to 1 minute. I will see who wishes to support the amendment, but I also understand Mr. Cox has informed me that he presents an oral sub-amendment to amendment number 1. Therefore, I think it would be wise to first go to Mr. Leite Rambos to explain his amendment, and then we can go to Mr. Cox to explain his sub-amendment if one of both or both wish to have the floor. I will start with Mr. Leite Ramos because this is the main amendment. Does Mr. Leite Ramos wish to have the floor? I don't see it. Then I immediately move to Mr. Cox, the sub-amendment. Maybe if I can clarify, in the amendment of Mr. Leite Ramos, it says a committee. Is Mr. Ramos there? Okay. Then I will give the floor first to Mr. Leite Ramos. You have the floor. Mr. Leite Ramos, you have to take the floor if you wish your amendment to be tabled. Okay, I see that Mr. Leite Ramos has a problem connecting or otherwise, so I declare the amendment by Mr. Ramos being moved. So then I come to Mr. Cox, who presents an oral sub-amendment. It reads as follows. In the amendment number 1 of Mr. Ramos, the sentence goes, a committee may deliberate and take decisions when 1/3 of its members are present at the beginning of the meeting. Mr. Cox has informed me that he wishes to change that sentence into a committee may take decisions when 1/4, 25%, of its members are present. So basically the change is between 1/3 of its members present at the beginning of the meeting, and Mr. Cox proposes to change that, taking decision when 1/4 of its members are present. Tini, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, President. And indeed, you already said what I wanted to propose. My proposal is based on the compromise that was reached between the leaders of the political groups last Sunday in our meeting of the Presidential Committee. I think it's, for the record, important that I read the oral sub-amendment completely, so that in the record it is stated what do we change in the rules. The sub-amendment reads as follows. In amendment number 1, replace the words 2nd, 4th and 5th sentences of Rule 40.7 and Rule 40.3 shall not apply. A committee may deliberate and take decisions when 1/3 of its members are present at the beginning of the meeting to replace these words with the following words: 2nd, 4th and 5th sentences of Rule 47.2, Rule 47.3 and Rule 47.4 shall not apply. A committee may take decisions when 1/4 of its members are present. And as said, this is a compromise between a very high quorum and not a quorum. And I think that almost all colleagues will be able to live with this 1/4 quorum. Thank you very much, Mr. President.
Thank you, Tini. Does anyone wish to speak out against the oral sub-amendment? Okay, can I then, I'm trying to follow here, can I then have the opinion of the mover of the main amendment, Mr. Leite-Ramons? Mr. Leite-Ramons, you have the floor.
Vous m'écoutez? Oui. Désolé, mais je suis en voyage entrant, donc j'ai problème de connexion. Notre idée initiale, c'était de maintenir les mêmes règles des réunions physiques dans les réunions à distance ou hybrides. Et donc, comme dans les réunions physiques, on a une vérification du quorum au début des réunions. Si on n'a pas de quorum, on close et on ouvre après la réunion à nouveau. L'idée, c'était...
Okay.
Nous n'opposons pas cette proposition de sous-amendement. C'est de rencontrer un excellent rapport. Merci.
Okay, so I understand that the author of the basic amendment does not oppose the sub-amendment. Do we have any opinion against? It is the moment to do so. No? Okay, then we will now move to vote on this oral sub-amendment. So to be clear, we are voting now on the oral sub-amendment of Tini Cox, which reads, in Amendment 1, replace the words second, fourth, and fifth sentence of Rule 47.2 and Rule 47.3 shall not apply. A committee may deliberate and take decisions when 1/3 of its members are present at the beginning of the meeting, to be replaced by second, fourth, and fifth sentences of Rule 47.2, Rule 47.3, and Rule 47.4 shall not apply. A committee may take decisions when 1/4 of its members are present. We now will move to the vote. Is the voting ready, Wojciech? The vote is open. Fifteen seconds. Hurry up. Vote is closed. Can we have the results, please? Can you read the result, Wojciech, because it's too far and too small for me to see. I just don't see that. Yeah, I see the results, but it's a bit too far. If you can...
The results are the following. 21 members voted in favor of sub-amendment, 5 members against, and 3 abstentions.
Okay, then the oral sub-amendment is accepted. Then we will now consider the main amendment as amended by the sub-amendment. Does anyone wish to express him or herself against? Since the committee was not able to consider the amendment, I therefore invite the rapporteur to give his opinion. Mr. Schwabe.
I really thank Luis and Tini. I think it's a very good compromise, so I'm in favor of this amendment as sub-amended.
Then we now will vote on this amendment as it has been amended. The vote is open. Fifteen seconds. 15 seconds. Vote is closed. Please read out the results, Wojciech.
Mr. President, the result is the following. 26 members voted in favor of Amendment 1 as amended, as sub-amended. 3 members voted against, and there are 3 abstentions.
Thank you very much. Then this amended as amended is accepted. We shall now proceed to vote on the draft resolution contained in document 15178 as amended. I recall the colleagues that in order to be adopted, a simple majority is required. So we now vote on the draft resolution. The vote is open. Okay. Just a second. The vote is not yet open. Just a second, colleagues. Okay, the vote is open. Please vote. Fifteen seconds. Vote is closed. Wojciech, if you can read out the results.
Mr. President, the resolution has been adopted with 29 votes in favor, no one against, and 5 abstentions.
Well, it's a nice result. So therefore, the resolution has been adopted. My congratulations to all of you, and more specifically to the rapporteur and the committee. It does allow us to be able to work in a very good way as from now, because the rules apply immediately, if I understand it well, Wojciech. But then we have report number 2 of the committee, modification of the Assembly's rules of procedure. This is the report, modification of the Assembly's rules of procedure, document 15179, presented by the Committee on Rules of Procedure, Immunities and Institutional Affairs. The report will be presented by the rapporteur, Madam Skau. You know the rules. You've got 10 minutes as rapporteur, and then the interventions are limited to 3 minutes. When we have amendments or not, I mean, then we'll tackle that one. But as of now, I did not receive any amendments. Madam Skau, you have the floor.
Do you hear me better now? Can you hear me? Yeah. President and colleagues, today I have the honor to present the conclusions of the reflections of the Committee on Rules of Procedure on some simple proposals to improve our procedures during plenary sittings and committee meetings. None of these proposals are radical changes. They simply aim at issues in the rules of procedure which should be supplemented or reviewed in order to better correspond with our parliamentary practice. I therefore hope that the members of the Standing Committee will support them. The draft resolution presented today contains proposals regarding the procedure of periodic review of member states' compliance with their obligations as implemented by the Monitoring Committee, and the procedure for examining amendments in committee and in plenary sittings, and the procedure for electing the President and the Vice Presidents of the Assembly, and the criteria applicable to the re-election of committee vice chairpersons, and the number of current affairs debate allowed during a part session for a standing committee meeting. I will now mention 5 issues. First, and most important issue relates to the procedure of the Monitoring Committee. The Monitoring Committee's term of reference were changed by Resolution 2261 in 2019 and Resolution 2325 in 2020. This This was in order to strengthen periodic review procedure of member states' compliance with the Council of Europe's obligations as a complementary mechanism to the full monitoring procedure and the post-monitoring dialogue. The Rules Committee was invited by the Bureau of the Assembly to assess the conformity of this new periodic review procedure with the rules. And in January 2020, the committee approved an opinion to the Bureau and made critical comments with regard to this periodic review procedure. In particular, it considered that the same procedural formalities should apply in an identical manner to all procedures covered by the terms of reference of the monitoring committee. A reference to the committee should be validated by the Assembly when it prepares a periodic review report, in the same way as a report of the classic monitoring procedure, or a report on the functioning of democratic institutions in a member state. On the 5th of March this year, the Bureau took note of the committee's opinion and asked the committee to make changes to the monitoring committee's term of reference accordingly. Paragraph 3.1 of the draft resolution presented today proposes to harmonize the relevant provisions of the term of reference of the monitoring committee. This is to make it clear that any decision of the monitoring committee to open a periodic review procedure in respect of certain member states shall require the approval of the Bureau in accordance with Rule 26 of the Rules of Procedure and ratification by the Assembly. The same clarification should also apply to another procedure mentioned in the monitoring committee's term of reference, that of the issue-based cross-country monitoring. Any reference to the monitoring committee for a report on a cross-country thematic issue must also be validated by the Bureau and the Assembly. Second, the second issue dealt with in my report relates to the procedure for examining amendments in committee and in plenary sitting. Members might recall that at the June 2019 part session, the Assembly and the Rules Committee had to reorganize their work due to a considerable number of amendments tabled for one particular report. In addition, members of the Assembly regularly expressed their dissatisfaction with the limitation of the numbers of speakers able to speak in a debate because of the large number of amendments tabled, forcing the list of speakers to be cut early. It is therefore proposed that Rule 34 on the procedure for examining amendments in committee and in plenary sitting be modified in order to strengthen the competence of committees when taking a position on amendments tabled. And paragraph 3.2 of the draft resolution proposes that amendments rejected by the committee ceased for report by a two-thirds majority shall not be taken up in plenary and shall be declared as definitively rejected unless 10 or more members of the Assembly object. And third issue, it is also proposed to simplify the procedures for the election of the President and Vice Presidents of the Assembly. These procedures should follow the Assembly's ordinary election procedure as applied to the election of judges to the European Court of Human Rights and higher-ranking officials of the Council of Europe. The procedure laid down for the election of the vice presidents, which was unused for a very long time, was implemented on the occasion of the ballot held during the October 2019 and January 2020 part session. This experience has shown that the procedure is unnecessarily complicated and no longer appropriate in view of the Assembly's practice. The procedure for electing the President of the Assembly is also the subject of the same remark. Proposed changes are suggested in paragraph 3.3 of the draft resolution. And so the fourth issue. Another proposal relates to the candidature for the office of chairpersons or vice chairpersons of committee with regard to members who have already held such offices. Current rules provide for a period during which a former chairperson may not stand for re-election to the same office. However, while former committee chairpersons are permitted to stand for election as chairpersons or vice chairpersons, subject to a 4-year waiting period for the same committee, or after the expiry of a 2-year period to stand for election to another committee, these conditions do not apply to outgoing vice chairpersons. The criteria applicable to the re-election of committee vice chairpersons has led to misunderstandings in some committees, which have had difficulty in finding candidates who met the regulatory requirements. Paragraph 3.4 of the draft resolution suggests that outgoing committee vice chairpersons are given the same waiting periods as outgoing committee chairpersons. And last, the fifth issue. The rules stipulate that the assembly of the standing committee may hold only one current affairs debate during an assembly part session or a standing committee meeting. The flow of events of recent months have mobilized members' attention, and several proposals for current affairs debate were made so that the current issue could be debated at the meetings of the standing committee. In this context, the limit of one debate per assembly part session or standing committee meeting imposed by the rules of procedure appear to have limited the possibility to discuss a greater number of subjects.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Okay, thank you, Madam Chair. We now go into the discussion first. In principle, we've got the representative of the political groups. If there are any representatives of political groups, please ask for the floor. I see one at this stage, Stefan Schenach. Stefan, you have the floor. Stefan Schenach, you have the floor.
Herr Präsident, ich hoffe, alles funktioniert. Im Namen meiner Fraktion möchte ich der Berichterstatterin, liebe Ingrid, herzlich für diesen Bericht danken. Ich denke, er ist eine Weiterentwicklung und bringt auch Klarheiten. Als früherer Vorsitzender des Monitoring-Ausschusses kann ich nur sagen, dass diese Klarstellungen den Monitoring-Ausschuss stärken werden und einiges klarstellen, weil wir ja doch ein paar Debatten in den letzten 2 Jahren diesbezüglich hatten. Somit ist das eine gute Lösung. Und auch wenn Entscheidungen des Monitoring-Ausschusses auch von dem Büro und dem Präsidium gestützt werden, nachvollzogen werden, halte ich das für richtig und gut. Zweitens, hier geht es in dem Bereich bei den Veränderungen bei den Präsidenten und Vizepräsidenten der Versammlung. Auch das finde ich sehr richtig und sehr gut, eine gute Klarstellung. Es ist gut, dass wir mit dem Paragraph 3.5 künftig auch verschiedene Current Affairs Debatten haben können. Ich denke, das ist oft der Situation, der politischen Situation und der Aktualität angesprochen. Auch was die Wahl zum Büro, zu den Büros und den Komitees betrifft, ist auch hier eine Klarstellung, wie das mit den Chairpersons und Vice Chairs ist. In diesem Sinne, liebe Ingrid, unsere Fraktion wird deinen Antrag vollinhaltlich unterstützen und ich hoffe, dass er auf breiter Ebene heute auch abgestimmt wird. Danke sehr.
Danke, Stefan. Then we move to Alexander Pojcik on behalf of EPP. Alex, you have the floor.
Monsieur le Président, chers collègues, au nom du groupe PPE, je tiens à remercier ma collègue Ingrid Skau pour la qualité de son travail et ses propositions. Et en même temps aussi, je félicite le travail du secrétariat de la Commission. Ces rapports portent sur un thème qui se situe au cœur de nos préoccupations en tant que membres de cette Assemblée. Je partage pleinement les objectifs visés, la performance, l'efficacité, la clarté des règles. La commission de suivi disposera d'une plus grande autonomie pour effectuer un examen périodique. J'adhère à la proposition d'unifier les 4 procédures. La procédure de suivi sensu stricto, le dialogue post-suivi, nos rapports sur le fonctionnement des institutions démocratiques dans les États membres et les examens périodiques. Je considère aussi que l'Assemblée doit jouer un rôle central dans ce processus. Je partage également la proposition en ce qui concerne la suivi thématique transnational. Je trouve excellente l'idée d'engager le bureau de l'Assemblée qui pourrait saisir la commission de suivi pour préparer un rapport sur une thématique transnationale. Nous avons beaucoup de cas où une telle procédure pourrait être très efficace. La procédure d'examen des amendements en commission et en séance plénière est une question essentielle du point de vue de l'efficacité. En effet, le dépôt massif d'amendements conduit à l'obstruction. Vu les calendriers et le nombre de sessions très limitées, il faut trouver la meilleure solution pour traiter les sujets d'une façon performante et garantir la qualité du travail rendu. Je suis aussi entièrement d'accord sur les débats d'actualité. Nous ne pouvons pas nous limiter à un débat sur la situation dans le monde. Les règles relatives aux élections du président et des vice-présidents de l'Assemblée devraient être revues. Nous sommes tous d'accord pour dire que les élections prennent trop de temps. Enfin, je remercie le rapporteur d'évoquer la question d'élection des présidents et vice-présidents des commissions. Les règles sont si compliquées que cela provoque souvent des hésitations ou des confusions. Au nom du groupe PPE, nous sommes favorables à l'adoption de ce rapport. Merci beaucoup.
Merci, Alexandre. I now have, on behalf of ALDE, Mr. Boulay. You have the floor. Julian, you have the floor.
Mr. President, Mrs. Scow, thank you so much for this report. We, the ALDE group in the PACE, we support the following elements of the report: the election of president and vice presidents, the re-election of vice chairpersons of committees, and the number of the current affair debates. However, we, the ALDE group, we have reservations on the rapporteur's proposal against, concerning the monitoring committee. So let me be very clear. We in the ALDE group strongly believe that the monitoring of the respect of commitments by member states, that we all call country monitoring, is one of our biggest and most important tasks in the Assembly. I'm continuously surprised why such useful instrument of parliamentary overview and assistance has come to be portrayed by some colleagues as a punishment against a member state. It's not a punishment, dear colleagues. So our monitoring procedure has greatly evolved since its creation. Today, we believe that being part of the Assembly means accepting the monitoring procedure. No state should seek to be shielded, be it by its status, size, or financial contribution. That is why the committee has introduced periodic monitoring. That is also why the committee seeks to involve more committee members into this exercise. As many of us as possible should be aware of what it takes to be the monitoring rapporteur and represent the monitored country. While we hear the rapporteur who declares her wish to avoid the risk to see a development where the periodic review procedure may replace the strict monitoring procedure, we believe that the rapporteur's proposal creates a new and perhaps greater risks. Indeed, the monitoring committee has now quite a detailed description of the selection procedure it intends to follow. This includes input from other committees and Council of Europe monitoring bodies, as well as a very concrete procedure of vote and establishing the list of countries that will be invited for a periodic monitoring. The rapporteur now proposes to subject the decisions taken through such a multi-step and multi-level procedure to the Bureau's political approval. Yet, this political filter goes against the committee's effort to take its selection procedure into a more criteria-based realm. Because the Bureau and our Assembly are highly political in nature, we are afraid that our decisions with regard to the monitoring will depend not so much on objective criteria, but on political and geopolitical preoccupations, on alliances the countries will be able or unable to build during the vote. I will finish by saying that the monitoring procedure is not at all a punishment, but an opportunity to all of us. So the ALDE group will abstain. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I now call the chair, Madam Scow, Rapporteur Amin, to respond. Madam Scow, you have the floor. Oh, I do apologize. This is unforgivable. I skipped Baroness Massey. Baroness Massey, you have the floor with all my apologies. Please do take the floor. Baroness Massey disappeared. She's angry at me. I hope not. Baroness Massey, if you can ask for the floor again, please. Okay, you have the floor.
Can you hear me? Yes? Good. Okay, thank you. Thank you so much. I shall be speaking briefly about my support for the report done by Sivinj Fatalieva, and I'm speaking on behalf of the Socialist group.
Baroness, this is another another report. You're a little bit too early.
So what am I
afraid.
speaking on? No, I'm not speaking on that then. I'm not speaking on anything.
You're speaking on rules and regulations and all that. So
I'm not speaking on that. No, I'm not.
Okay, then we'll get back to you later when we have this report that you mentioned.
Thank you so much. I'm not cross with you. I'm fine. I just came in too early. Sorry.
Okay, thank you, Madam Presidency. We'll have you later on. Okay, so then now I call Madam Scout to respond, please. And Geert, you've got the floor.
Thank you. And only a few comments, and I'd like to thanks for the comments and also the reflections from my colleagues, Mr. Schenak and also Mr. Polacek. And I would also like to return some comments to Mr. Bulai, because in the report it's still, I quite agree, because it's very necessary to have this periodic monitoring, and it's also help for the country, it's not a punishment, and still there is a possibility to decide that in the monitoring, but it has to be approved by the Assembly, the Standing Committee, and also the Assembly. So that's my only comments, and I appreciate what my colleagues said, and I'd like to close my remarks with that. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Scout. Then the debate is closed. Close your account. Okay, thank you. Now we will proceed to the vote. I again would like to remind each and every one of you on board that only members of the Standing Committee are entitled to vote. We will vote on the draft resolution. A simple majority is required. The Committee on Rules of Procedure, Immunities and Institutional Affairs has presented a draft resolution to which no amendments have been tabled. We shall now proceed to vote on the draft resolution contained in document 15179, and to be adopted a simple majority, as I already said, is required. Is the vote enabled, Wojciech? Just give me a thumbs up if it's open. The vote is open. Fifteen seconds. Please vote. The vote is closed. Wojciech, if you can give us the results, please.
Mr. President, 22 members voted in favor of the resolution. There was no vote against and 6 abstentions.
Therefore, the resolution is adopted. Congratulations to the rapporteur and the committee. And this concludes the modifications to our rules in order to enable us to function full-fledged as from January, also in plenary mode. Thank you very much for the excellent work to the rapporteurs, to the committees, and to all members on board. And please stay on board. We've got still some reports to do. We now come to the next report, Equality and Non-Discrimination, the gender dimension of foreign policy. This is document 15122, presented by the Committee on Equality and Non-Discrimination. I would like to remind you that due to a lack of time, the Standing Committee couldn't debate this report at its October meeting and had to postpone this debate to our meeting of today. The report will be presented by the rapporteur, Madam Petra Stienen from the Netherlands. Madam Stienen, you have the floor.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. Good afternoon, dear colleagues. Let me start with a quote by Margaret Wallström, the former Swedish Minister of Foreign Affairs, who led the way with Swedish feminist foreign policy. I quote, Gender equality is not a separate women's issue. It benefits everyone. Research shows that gender equal societies enjoy better health, stronger economic growth, and higher security. It also shows that gender equality contributes to peace, and that peace negotiations in which women have taken part have a better chance of being sustainable. End of quote. 2020, my dear colleagues, was supposed to be the year of big anniversaries of events that were crucial in the work for the promotion and protection of women's rights, equality and non-discrimination. Indeed, the key elements of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, with of course most notably SDG 5 that calls for achieving gender equality and to empower all women and girls worldwide. In 2020, we are celebrating the 25th anniversary of the Beijing Platform for Action for Gender Equality. We're also celebrating the 20th anniversary of UN Security Council 1325, the normative framework for women, peace, and the security agenda. Well, when I say celebrating, indeed some progress has been achieved in the fields of education for girls, better healthcare, more job opportunity for women, and political participation. But it's not a complete celebration, because in the 21st century, no country has achieved full gender equality. And the 2020 context shows a lot of reason for concern as well. We see attacks against women's rights worldwide. There is a growing backlash throughout the world and a continued threat against sexual and reproductive health and rights. And the COVID-19 pandemic has seen an increase of violence against women. Therefore, it saddens me that even in this organization, we hear voices against the Istanbul Convention, a legal framework that is designed to prevent and combat this horrible terror behind the front door. So looking at the state of affairs, looking at the backlash and the impact of the pandemic, it is clear that we need an inclusive and coordinated international response that reaffirms the importance of women's rights as human rights. In my report, Gender Dimension of Foreign Policy, you will see that including a gender dimension in foreign policy is instrumental in dealing with that backlash and improving gender equality and ending discrimination. Dear colleagues, we based our findings on extensive research on countries that are like Sweden, leading the way in including gender dimensions of foreign policy. Think of Canada, Finland, France, the Netherlands, Sweden, and the UK. We met with a delegation from Japan. We also had a number of hearings, webinars, and a country visit to Sweden and the Netherlands. I would like to thank the support and inspiration of the members of the PACE Equality Committee, the Secretariat of the PACE Equality Committee, and especially Elodie Fischer for her insightful work on this report. Dear colleagues, I would like to share 3 key messages that we can take away from my report. The first message, or lesson rather, is the gender dimension of foreign policy is a question of power and leadership. Giving priority to the promotion of equality and inclusion and ensuring a diverse participation in decision-making depend on political will and courage. I think Margot Wallström has really shown this as well. Making gender equality a priority in foreign policy sends a powerful message. It reaffirms that women's rights are human rights. It sets the tone for making equality a political priority at international and national levels. Because to promote gender equality abroad, but to forget about this at home is not walking the talk. And this demands leadership by women and men at all levels, also here in our own organization. And I'm happy to see more and more male leaders who proudly call themselves feminists, like Minister Roth did this morning, when he set out the priorities of the German presidency of the Committee of Ministers of the Council of Europe. The second message we can take away from my report is policies and responses to international crises will be more efficient and beneficial and sustainable to all when a gender dimension is included in foreign policy decisions. As long as fuel equality is not a reality, we need to take specific measures. This is essential to ensure participation of women in decision-making, crisis management, and peace operations. And Mr. President, I think this will also be relevant for our upcoming work in the PACE on climate and human rights. And we should be aware, gender is not only about women. As I already mentioned this morning, yesterday, the 19th of November, it was International Men's Day. I noticed that not everybody was aware of this. The 8th of March, International Women's Day, is on our agenda, but the International Men's Day should be an important day as well, because it's a day that is celebrating the positive value men bring to the world, to their families and communities. But this day also reminds us of the importance to look at what we call harmful norms of masculinities that are hindering gender equality and good crisis responses. And as the minister said this morning, gender equality is not about replacing a patriarchal system with a matriarchal system. No, it's about a society that is inclusive and equal for all genders. The third lesson, the third message is a gendered foreign policy or a feminist foreign policy should be inclusive and intersectional. The diplomatic world should not and must not be accessible only to the boys' clubs, between brackets, or only the white women from middle and high income families who have access to political and diplomatic networks. Promoting the participation and inclusion of persons from multiple backgrounds in all sectors of foreign policy, including in the diplomatic service and international organizations, should be at the core of the gender dimensions of foreign policy. So how can we implement these lessons? From the case study and country visits, we can list a number of good practices and measures to ensure a gender dimensions in foreign policy. In a way, they're very similar to the 4 R's of the Swedish feminist foreign policy: rights, resources, representation, and realism. I will give you my shopping list, and I hope that this shopping list will inspire all of us in the next coming years. What we need is an implementation of the existing human rights frameworks, including the Istanbul Convention. We call for a targeted allocation of resources and gender budgeting. We need to ensure diversity in panels. We need to provide trainings on gender equality, diversity, and inclusion. We also emphasize the need for the institutionalizing of gender mainstreaming. We should strive for the equal participation of women and men in diplomatic services, but also in trade missions, and promote networking and mentoring between women leaders and politicians, including young women in politics and leadership. We need to develop policy and legal measures to support a work-life balance, also in international organizations, also at the Council of Europe. We need to promote balanced participation in political and public decision-making. And we need, and I emphasize on this point, we need to proactively engage men and boys in these transformative policies and to work closely with male role models and champions for gender equality. To conclude, we also believe that a real gender impact assessment can be a useful tool to evaluate the progress in implementing the gender dimension in foreign policy. Mr. President, dear Rick, I will leave it at this, and I'm very curious to hear the questions and reactions of our colleagues. Thank you.
Thank you, Petra. We now move to the representatives of the political groups. First on my list is Ms. Selen Sayek-Böke for the Socialist Democrats and Greens. Ms. Selen Sayek, you have the floor.
Mr. President, on behalf of the Socialist Democrats and Greens group, I'd like to congratulate the rapporteur for this very diligent work. As was noted, these are dire times for gender equality, and indeed gender inequality has been and continues to be a major barrier to human progress. And unfortunately, the COVID-19 pandemic has only made it worse, and a backlash to women's rights is on the rise. Therefore, we need deliberate efforts to overcome this barrier, and we need to counter the backlash. Gender-based discrimination in health, in education, in political representation, in labor markets is pervasive, as was noted. And violence in a patriarchal system is on the rise and continues to hit women hard in their most intimate relations. Therefore, this clearly points out to the need for a comprehensive and holistic approach to tackle this issue. And we need to bring gender equality into the forefront of all of our policy frameworks. Economic policy, social policy, political security, political systems, foreign policy, a comprehensive framework is needed. And I think this is why this report we are now debating is very critical. A feminist foreign policy, first and foremost, acknowledges the need for this comprehensive policy framework. And it says that we need to put that gender equality into perspective in whatever we're dealing with. It acknowledges that gender inequality is not a problem in vacuum. It's indeed intertwined with what we would call hard foreign policy, such as issues of national security. But it also acknowledges that foreign policies are also a political tool to promote equality, inclusiveness, and a rights-based world order. I'd like us all to think of foreign policy for a second. It includes trade policies, it includes humanitarian aid, it includes migration, it includes defense efforts, and all of these clearly have implications for gender equality and therefore should be tackling the issue. And all experiences point to the need for a strong political leadership in this matter. And this is where our organization plays a critical role. And as Petra Stienen has rightfully mentioned, this cannot be only an issue of women's leadership. It has to be one where women's rights are acknowledged as human rights and where the quest for equality becomes a common goal for all of us. And we need to walk the talk. We need to ensure that equal gender representation is indeed applied in policy making and in representation. Only 15% of the world's ambassadors are women. Out of the 47 Council of European Member States, only 8 have women as foreign ministers. Clearly, we need change and we need to break the glass ceiling together. And we need not only to make foreign policy content gender equal, but we need to ensure equal representation in foreign policy making. On behalf of our group, in light of these comments, I congratulate the rapporteur and all who have contributed to this report.
Thank you very much. Maintenant, nous allons vers Madame Laurence Trastour-Isnard pour le groupe EPP. Vous avez la parole. Madame Trastour, vous avez la parole. Apparemment, nous avons un petit... Because I'm seeing a lot of people here. Okay, Madame Fresco-Hofer, vous avez la parole.
Oui, merci Monsieur le Président. J'ai eu un petit souci en effet d'écran. Chers collègues, Madame la rapporteure, le groupe ALDE et moi-même tenons à vous remercier pour ce rapport. Ce travail est de grande importance puisqu'il se situe dans la droite ligne de nos travaux. En effet, lorsque l'on évoque la dimension de genre, on fait allusion à une politique inclusive et non discriminatoire. Et au-delà, une politique respectueuse des droits humains, notion chère au Conseil de l'Europe. Vous avez évoqué la diplomatie féministe et je souhaitais en rappeler sa définition. Promouvoir au travers de relations diplomatiques des idéaux et bonnes pratiques pour atteindre l'égalité entre les sexes et à garantir à toutes les femmes et filles la jouissance de leurs droits fondamentaux. Lorsque l'on regarde ce à quoi de nombreuses femmes sont confrontées partout dans le monde, on ne peut que se réjouir que certains pays, et vous les avez cités, aient décidé de consacrer énergie et moyens financiers pour elles. Les célébrations des journées internationales, comme celle de la tolérance zéro à l'égard des mutilations génitales féminines, le 6 février, la journée internationale pour l'élimination de la violence à l'égard des femmes, le 25 novembre, et enfin la journée internationale de la fille, le 10 octobre, montrent bien l'intérêt que nous portons tous, dirigeants et parlementaires, à ces problématiques. Encore faut-il leur donner un sens par des actes forts. Alors, intégrer une dimension de genre dans la politique étrangère, c'est donner de l'importance à la promotion des droits des femmes via nos représentations diplomatiques. Signer des conventions inclusives, c'est considérer qu'un égal accès à l'éducation, un juste respect du corps des femmes, une égalité professionnelle, le droit de vivre en paix dans un environnement favorable doivent être la norme. Allouer des budgets à des ONG ou à des programmes gouvernementaux respectueux des droits des femmes et des filles, c'est leur construire un avenir et assurer aux générations futures un monde meilleur. Enfin, octroyer des prix Nobel à des acteurs de la lutte pour le respect des femmes et des filles, comme en 2014 à Malala Yousafzai pour ses actions en faveur de l'éducation des filles, et en 2018 à Madame Murad et au docteur Mukwege pour la protection des femmes pendant les conflits, c'est bien montrer que les instances internationales désirent être proactives dans ces domaines. Vous l'avez souligné, Madame le rapporteur, pour appliquer le principe de la dimension de genre à la politique étrangère, c'est d'abord se l'appliquer en interne, en donnant des postes à responsabilité à des femmes dont la nomination est pertinente. Permettez-moi de vous indiquer que Monaco a nommé 8 ambassadeurs et 10 ambassadrices. Vous avez dit, et ce sera ma conclusion, il ne s'agit pas d'exclure les hommes, mais de partager les responsabilités, l'influence et le pouvoir de décision. Et finalement, travailler pour que l'égalité de genre devienne une réalité mondiale. Je vous remercie.
Merci. Je reviens maintenant à la représentatrice pour le IPP. Madame Laurence Trastour-Isnard, vous avez la parole.
Est-ce que ça fonctionne cette fois-ci? Oui, impeccable. Merci, Monsieur le Président, Madame la rapporteure, chers collègues. Au nom du groupe PPE, je vous remercie pour ce rapport. Le 21e siècle doit être enfin le siècle de l'égalité entre les hommes et les femmes. Mais l'égalité des sexes est loin d'être une réalité aujourd'hui. Les inégalités demeurent, que ce soit à l'école, au travail, en politique ou encore dans les familles. Les violences infligées aux femmes restent toujours aussi fortes. Les atteintes aux droits des femmes sont toujours aussi nombreuses. Beaucoup de travail reste à faire. Cette proposition de résolution invitant les États à lancer des politiques étrangères faisant la promotion de l'égalité des sexes et de l'inclusion va donc dans la bonne direction. Je veux remercier ici le travail accompli par la rapporteure et saluer son initiative qui émet à la fois des recommandations précises et larges. Une des recommandations majeures de ce texte est de favoriser l'accès des femmes aux carrières diplomatiques. Comme il a été rappelé dans le rapport, en 2016, la Commission pour l'égalité de genre du Conseil de l'Europe a relevé que le nombre de pays ayant atteint l'objectif minimum de 40% de femmes diplomates restait encore très faible. En moyenne, 12%, voire 13% seulement des ambassadeurs sont des femmes. Il y a un plafond de verre dans le secteur diplomatique, d'autant plus que les femmes y travaillant restent toujours souvent cantonnées à des postes de rang inférieur. Cependant, elles doivent pouvoir accéder aux places des décideurs publics sans aucune autre distinction que celle de leur mérite et de leur talent. Elles ont toute leur place dans la gouvernance et dans l'action politique afin d'y apporter leur concours, leurs compétences et leurs qualités. Le rapport a également à juste titre posé le constat des conséquences pernicieuses de la pandémie de la Covid-19 sur les femmes, non seulement parce qu'elles représentent la majorité des professionnels de santé, mais aussi en termes de bien-être économique et de sûreté et de sécurité. Dans plusieurs pays, la violence à l'égard des femmes et la violence domestique a augmenté de manière notable pendant le confinement. Prévenir la violence infligée aux femmes, protéger les victimes, poursuivre les auteurs d'actes de violence est indispensable. À cet égard, il faut promouvoir la ratification et la mise en œuvre de la Convention d'Istanbul, qui est un des traités les plus avancés en matière de violences faites aux femmes en Europe. La proposition de résolution le propose et c'est une très bonne chose. L'égalité entre les femmes et les hommes est indispensable pour que tous puissent bénéficier d'un équilibre et que l'ensemble des droits humains soient respectés. Je vous remercie.
Merci beaucoup. Now we come to the representative of UEL, Ms. Rosa Björk-Brynjolfsdottir. Rosa, you have the floor.
Dear colleagues, I want to congratulate the rapporteur Pietra Stinen for her report, and I fully agree with the rapporteur that this report is very timely. Of course, it's always timely and necessary to address the gender issues here in the Assembly as elsewhere. But as the year 2020, we are remembering many international milestones of the fight for gender equality, as the rapporteur mentioned, the 25th anniversary of the Beijing Platform for Action for Gender Equality. And this year we have 20 years since the 1325 UN Resolution for Women, Peace and the Security Agenda was adopted. But as the rapporteur mentioned, women's rights are unfortunately under attack, and there is a growing backlash against women's rights both worldwide and in the Council of Europe's member states. And as both the rapporteur and Michael Roth mentioned today, COVID-19 has brought to light an increase of violence against women. And as both a representative of my political group and also head of the Icelandic delegation, I must mention the Scandinavian way, or the Nordic countries' way, because when it comes to gender equality, Scandinavia is often praised for leading the way towards greater equality between women and men in different fields. And as of 2020, Iceland Margot Wallström, the former Swedish Minister of Foreign Affairs, who led the way with framing the Swedish feminist foreign policy, which I have been very impressed by and have talked about and suggested here in the Icelandic Parliament that we should adapt in our foreign policy in more precise manner. I want also to mention, as a Vice Chair of the Committee of Migration, Refugees and Displaced Persons, that the need for gender dimension in foreign policy, whereas it comes to women as migrants, is necessary. And my upcoming report on gender mainstreaming of migration policies is about that. So there we have a common ground of these two reports. But dear colleagues, women's rights has never been given to women. They have had to fight for them. And gender equality does not come about of its own accord. There has to be a collective action and solidarity of women and human rights defenders, as we are here in the Assembly. And there must be a political will and tools as legislation and gender budgeting and quotas. And also, I fully agree with the rapporteur and her report that bringing more women and more equality to the table when it comes to conflicts and peace resolution always brings about more effective solution. And that I want to agree upon, and I congratulations to the rapporteur once again for her good report and thoroughly, and I suggest we agree upon the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Rosa. We now move to Mr. Yildiz. After four ladies, the first man. Mr. Yildiz, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. Dear Petra, congratulations for the report. I wish you had come to Turkey when I was Deputy Foreign Minister to give an opinion about Turkish example on diplomacy. Let me give some numbers, ratios. The ratio of political officers in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Turkey is 34%. Number of mid-level diplomats, 31. Rate of ambassadors, lady ambassadors, 25%. And the number of young female diplomats are increasing year by year. Mr. President, dear rapporteur, I am also in NATO. I hear the reports there about the participation of women in peacekeeping missions as a success story. They are wanted very much. We have the same experience as Turkey. When we expand our diplomatic missions to Africa, now we are, I think, the fourth biggest diplomatic representation in the world. When we appoint lady ambassadors and other lady diplomats to Africa, they were very successful in reaching out to disadvantaged communities, to the roots of the communities, and to better communicate about technical assistance, humanitarian assistance. It is really a success story. This encouraged young students to prefer the diplomacy. Thank you very much for your attention. I wish to talk about this later with Petra. Thank you.
Thank you, Yildiz. Okay, get away. We now move to Ms. Kolo. You have the floor, Ms. Kolo.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Mr. Petra, for this comprehensive and excellent report. Reading this document, I was proud because I am a woman, I am a parliamentarian, and I have an opportunity to vote for this report today. No Bosnian woman had a chance to participate in the peace negotiation process after the war in Bosnia and Herzegovina. No Bosnian woman participated in the process of creating our constitution, which is a part of Dayton Peace Agreement. I agree with Petra that women's rights are human rights. Equal participation of women in the decision-making, peace operation, negotiation, crisis management is the key to achieving a just society. Men and women and our children deserve a just society. I think that gender equality is not only related to women. And thank you, Petra, again.
Thank you very much. Alors maintenant, je passe la parole à Jacques Maire. Jacques, vous avez la parole.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Bien sûr, tout mon soutien à Petra pour ce rapport excellent et important. Je veux dire que moi-même, en tant qu'ancien diplomate, quand je suis rentré au Quai d'Orsay au début des années 90, il y avait des femmes collègues, mais très très peu de femmes ambassadeurs. Peut-être une ou deux à l'époque. Aujourd'hui, elles sont 40% aux affaires étrangères françaises. Et ça a fondamentalement modifié effectivement le visage de notre diplomatie. Ce que je peux vous dire, c'est que quand nous envoyons, par exemple, en diplomatie parlementaire, une mission de femmes, comme je l'ai fait récemment au Niger, dont je suis président du groupe d'amitié, une mission parlementaire de femmes députées françaises qui va dans un pays africain, n'a pas du tout la même mission, ni même les mêmes rencontres que quand c'est une mission masculine ou même une mission mixte. Il y a vraiment, je dirais, une faible visibilité, une sous-visibilité des acteurs de changement que sont les femmes dans beaucoup de pays. Et de ce point de vue, effectivement, si les femmes ne jouent pas un rôle dans cette action diplomatique, je dirais que c'est la diplomatie qui est hémiplégique. Un autre élément qui est cité et sur lequel je suis très, très, très attentif aussi, c'est la question de l'aide au développement. Vous savez probablement, un des enjeux très importants, c'est quand même l'éducation des jeunes filles dans beaucoup de pays. On sait très bien que les grossesses précoces engendrent de la pauvreté, engendrent de la malnutrition, engendrent du sous-emploi, engendrent des migrations. L'éducation des jeunes filles est évidemment un enjeu absolument central. Et le fait que, vous l'avez cité encore une fois, que 50% des financements de l'Agence française de développement à l'horizon de 2022 seront orientés avec une composante de prise en compte des femmes est un élément essentiel. Donc, pour tous ces éléments, la notion de diplomatie féministe ne doit pas être perçue comme étant une forme de provocation ou de posture, je dirais, de prise de distance. C'est vraiment la prise en considération de ce que doivent être les différents moyens et canaux d'évolution aujourd'hui pour la diplomatie, pour l'aide au développement, pour faire en sorte que nous soyons plus efficaces et que nous puissions nous adresser à 100% de la population au monde. Voilà, c'est pour ça que c'est une pierre importante et j'espère qu'il y en aura ensuite beaucoup d'autres par la suite. Je vous remercie.
Merci, Jacques. We now go to Mr. Jallow from Sweden. Mr. Jallow, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Petra. I want to really congratulate you for this great draft report. The gender dimension of foreign policy. I'm very proud to be part of the Swedish delegation, where in Sweden we have this gender dimension of foreign policy, and inspired this report too. As we have seen, as many of you have said, the growing attacks and backlashes against women's rights in many of our member states, and that's why this report is timely and is urgent. Feminism, my daughter once told me feminism is the radical idea that men are equal to men are equal to women. And she emphasizes radical because she was being ironic. And adopting a gender dimension of foreign policy reaffirms that women's rights are human rights. And how radical is that? That's supposed to be obvious for all of us in this Council of Europe Parliamentary Assembly. It means building a society that is inclusive, that provides possibilities for all genders. And that should be obvious. It means also we, as members of this Parliamentary Assembly, we would do our job, because that is our job, promoting human rights. And I want to thank Petra for this initiative. It is long overdue. And I hope those of us that identify as men will play our part in achieving this goal. And we need to go from words to action. It is time, and it's long overdue. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Jallo. Now we go to Madam Danuta Jazlowiecka from Poland. Danuta, you have the floor. Danuta, you disappeared. You have to come back on. Our Secretary General has trained me so hard to express your name in the right way. Okay, Danuta, you have the floor. Voilà. Danuta, you have to come back. There you are.
Hello.
Super, you have the floor. Go ahead.
Thank you very much. Mr. President, dear colleagues, on behalf of EPP Group, I would like to congratulate to Mr. Rosa Bjork, and I'm not sure if we are on this point, because I was asking for speaking time on report of Mr. Rosa Bjork.
Then we'll have to get you back a little bit later.
Yes, exactly.
I've been training so hard to get your name right, so now I got it right. Okay.
Thank
We'll
you.
have you later. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
This being said, the speakers list is closed. Now I call on Petra Stienen to respond. Petra?
Yes, thank you, dear colleagues. This was wonderful to listen to, and there were so many new ideas and observations. I will pick two. One, Ahmed Yildiz, thank you very much for pointing out about the Turkish situation. When I was a young diplomat, I did my internship in the embassy in Ankara, and I actually had to write a report on the Directorate General on Women's Affairs, 92. So I learned a bit of my feminism in Istanbul. So maybe this is why I'm such a big fan of the Istanbul Convention. And then Rosa Björk, I once interviewed an ambassador from Iceland, a female ambassador. She told me that her young son asked her after 17 years of a female president, "Mommy, can men become a president as well?" So what you can't see, you can't be what you can't see, but this was a very important example. I would like to conclude with a quote from a friend of mine who is also a member of the European Parliament. As you might know, the European Parliament recently adopted a resolution on gender equality in the EU foreign security policy. And Samira Rafaela, a member of the Renew Group in the European Parliament, made a very important comment during the PACE webinar on gender dimension of foreign policy in response to COVID-19. I quote, "Women are different. There is not one group of women. Women are facing different challenges because of who they are and where they come from. Intersectionality in our policies, proposals, and legislation is extremely important so that we leave no one behind." End of quote. So with this in mind, I want to conclude, Mr. President, rather than a feminist foreign policy, I think we could go even further and call for an inclusive foreign policy, indeed a policy that will be instrumental in protecting the human rights of all of our citizens, of all genders. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We now go to the chair of the committee, Madame Bayer. Do you wish to have the floor? If so, you have the floor.
Vielen lieben Dank. Eine Politik, die Gleichbehandlung, Inklusion, den Schutz von Menschenrechten, natürlich einschließlich von Frauenrechten, hoch auf die Agenda setzt, das ist keine Politik für Schönwetter. Wenn wir sonst keine anderen Probleme haben, dann machen wir halt Gleichberechtigung. Nein, das ist eine Politik für jeden Tag, eine ganz, ganz wichtige Politik. Gleichberechtigung der Geschlechter, die Garantie, dass Frauen frei von Gewalt leben können, dass sie empowered sind, muss eine zentrale Grundlage jedes politischen Handelns sein und muss Hand in Hand gehen mit geteilter Macht und geteilten Positionen. Das heißt, dass Frauen und Männer auch gleich viel Einfluss in der Gesellschaft, gleich viele Möglichkeiten, gleich viel Macht letztendlich haben müssen. Und es muss Hand in Hand gehen mit Inklusion und mit Durchlässigkeit. Und das betrifft natürlich auch so wichtige Politikfelder wie die Außenpolitik, weil der Anteil von Frauen am Verhandlungstisch, gerade bei Friedensverhandlungen, Frau Kolo von Bosnien und Herzegowina hat es zuerst gesagt, gerade der Anteil von Frauen in Verhandlungen ist absolut essentiell für das Ergebnis. Wer ein Land repräsentiert, welche Daten im Zuge von Außenpolitik gewonnen werden, ist entscheidend. Und auch wer Völkerrecht implementiert, wer die Effekte von Recht, von Politik auf schwächere Gruppen evaluiert, ist absolut entscheidend dafür, wie Politik bei den Menschen ankommt, bei den Frauen und bei den Männern ganz gleichermaßen. So, um auch zum Schluss zu kommen, ich denke, feministische oder gendersensitive Politik ist essentiell dafür, dass wirklich alle ein Recht haben, alle Rechte wirklich respektiert werden. Und ich möchte mich auch ganz herzlich bei Petra Stinen für diesen wunderbaren Bericht bedanken, der so eine ganz neue Dimension für viele eröffnet hat. Ich hoffe, es werden noch viele weitere Berichte in der Art und Qualität folgen. Und bedanke mich auch beim Sekretariat des Equality-Ausschusses für die tolle Arbeit und die tolle Kooperation, aber auch beim ganzen Ausschuss. Wir hatten viele Hearings und Diskussionen und es kam ganz viel Impact und ganz viele Ideen, die Petra alle in diesen Report hineingepackt hat. Danke dafür und ich hoffe, wir setzen das jetzt in möglichst vielen Ländern und auf möglichst vielen Ebenen auch gemeinsam um.
Danke Ihnen. Now we come to the conclusion of the report. I would like to remind our members that only the members of the Standing Committee are entitled to vote. We vote on the draft resolution document 15222. To be adopted, a simple majority is required. Do we have the vote open, Wojciech? Yes, the vote is open. Please vote. Apparently, we are experiencing a little technical hiccup. If you're able to vote, please vote. We're having a little bit of a small issue here. Ten seconds. Voilà. The vote is closed. Wojciech, if I can have the result, please.
Mr. President, there are 26 members who voted in favor of the resolution. No abstentions, no votes against.
Okay, so this is then unanimously carried by 26. The resolution is adopted. My congratulations to the rapporteur and the committees. I think we might even say that we're a little bit proud of this. To say it in Dutch, Petra, we zijn allemaal toch wel een heel klein beetje trots op jou. Nee, eigenlijk best wel heel trots. Okay, let's go to our next point of the meeting, which is number 14, Committee of Culture, Science, Education and Media. The debate on the report, Threats to Academic Freedom and Autonomy of Higher Education Institutions in Europe. This is the document 15167, tabled by the Committee on Culture, Science, Education and Media. Due to the lack of time, the Standing Committee couldn't debate this report at its October meeting and had to postpone this debate to our meeting today. The report will be presented by the rapporteur, Mr. Brenner. I have been informed that Monsieur Becht has some agenda issues, so I hope that he can still be on board after Mr. Brenner to take the floor at some stage and to maybe also enlighten us about some oral amendments. We'll see how we'll take that. But at this stage, Mr. Brenner, the floor is yours.
Sehr geehrter Herr Präsident, liebe Kolleginnen und Kollegen, es ist mir eine besondere Freude und Ehre, nun heute diesen Bericht zu präsentieren, weil ich meine, dass die akademische Freiheit kein Randthema ist. Zugegebenerweise bin ich etwas voreingenommen als langjähriger akademischer Leiter der Universität von Budapest und selbst Forscher-Linguist. Aber ich meine, dass im 21. Jahrhundert, im Jahrhundert vom Wissen und von der Information, die akademische Freiheiten und die Autonomie im Hochschulwesen ein besonders wichtiges Thema ist. Und zwar auch deswegen, weil, wie ich meine, für den Europarat besonders wichtig, weil es ist auch in irgendeiner Form ein Spiegel, inwiefern die demokratischen Verhältnisse sich in der Gesellschaft widerspiegeln, so ähnlich wie zum Beispiel im Bereich der Medienfreiheit, Pressefreiheit oder Versammlungsfreiheit. Bildung und im Allgemeinen und Hochschulbildung im Besonderen sind, wie ich gesagt habe, eigentlich ein Spiegel der Gesellschaft und es sind Gemeingüter, die für die gesamte Gesellschaft dann zugänglich sein sollten. Leider muss ich auch feststellen in meinem Bericht, dass es gibt immer noch einige Mitgliedstaaten des Europarats, die die besondere und zu betonende Wichtigkeit von Bildung und Hochschulbildung vielleicht noch nicht so realisiert haben. Und ich möchte darauf verweisen, dass im März das Global Public Policy Institute, die Friedrich-Alexander-Universität Erlangen-Nürnberg, Scholars at Risk Network und Wiedem Institut dann einen neuen Academic Freedom Index veröffentlicht haben. Die in meinem Bericht namentlich genannten Staaten, sprich Russland, die Türkei, Aserbaidschan, rangieren ganz unten auf diesen Academic Freedom Index an Rang 113, 135 und 137 leider. Und meine Heimat Ungarn hat den schlechtesten Platz belegt unter den EU-Mitgliedstaaten, muss ich auch leider feststellen. Und Diese Tatsachen untermauern die Wichtigkeit von diesem Bericht, der sehr breit gefächert ist. Das wäre mein nächster Gedanke. Das Thema ist wahnsinnig komplex und ich möchte die lieben Kolleginnen und Kollegen auffordern, diesen Bericht im Detail zu lesen. Ich hoffe, Sie haben das im Detail gelesen, weil es ist ein sehr komplexes Thema, nämlich die Gefahren, die die akademische Freiheit und die Uni-Autonomie dann vorhanden ist. Diese Gefahren sind nicht nur unbedingt in undemokratischen Tendenzen dann zu finden. Natürlich auch dort. Allerdings habe ich darauf verzichtet, in meinem Bericht dann einzelne Staaten aufzufordern, gewisse Maßnahmen zu setzen. Nicht, weil ich meine, dass das nicht notwendig wäre, sondern deswegen, weil ich meine, dass wir zuerst ein allgemeingültiges Dachwerk für dieses Thema schaffen sollen, für das Monitoring für die akademischen Freiheiten und für ein entsprechendes Sanktionenregelwerk sorgen müssen. Und dann wäre es gerecht, hier Aufforderungen an gewisse einzelne Mitgliedstaaten dann zu formulieren. Ich möchte betonen, dass hier sehr viele Arten der Gefahren in meinem Bericht vorhanden sind. Zum Beispiel die weitestgehende Kommerzialisierung des Hochschulwesens oder auch der Druck der öffentlichen Meinung auf die akademischen Forscher und Professoren, die sehr häufig zum Beispiel zur Selbstzensur der Universitätsdozenten führen und so weiter und so fort. Als nächsten Punkt möchte ich betonen, dass ich ganz besonders begrüße, dass nach 20 Jahren von den ersten Maßnahmen gerechnet in diesen Bereichen für die akademischen Freiheiten und der institutionellen Autonomie der Hochschulinstitutionen wir jetzt am 19. November vom Ministerrat des Europäischen Hochschulraumes endlich eine gültige Definition dann formuliert bekommen haben. Was ist die akademische Freiheit? Dementsprechende Änderungsvorschläge werden dann anschließend ja auch für meinen Bericht dann vorhanden sein. Das ist auch deswegen wichtig, weil ansonsten hatten wir ja bis jetzt nur gewisse Entscheidungen vom Europäischen Gerichtshof, die eine gewisse rechtliche Grundlage hier gebildet haben. Allerdings möchte ich betonen, dass diese Entscheidung vom Europäischen Gerichtshof natürlich eher auf Artikel 10 beruht haben, nämlich auf die Meinungsäußerungsfreiheit, also nicht direkt die akademische Freiheit betroffen haben. Und ich meine, dass wir als Europarat jetzt den ersten Schritt machen müssen und endlich wirklich eine europäische Konvention erarbeiten müssen, gemeinsam für die akademischen Freiheiten und institutionelle Autonomie der Hochschulinstitutionen. Und ich meine, dass in diesem Bericht eine kleine Vorgabe schon vorhanden ist und ich meine, dass wir hier einen bescheidenen Beitrag für dieses große Regelwerk doch haben. Wie ich meine, ist ein besonderes Problem das schon erwähnte Problem der Kommerzialisierung. Diesen Punkt möchte ich doch kurz erläutern. Lange Zeit in der europäischen Tradition war nämlich Wissenschaft und Forschung eine gemeinsame Reise von den Professoren mit ihren Studenten, Studierenden. Am klassischsten vertreten in der deutschen Kultur von Humboldt. In den letzten Jahrzehnten haben wir leider beobachtet, dass immer mehr eine Kommerzialisierung stattgefunden hat, wo die Studenten einfach als Käufer von einem Diplom sozusagen erscheinen. Und ich meine, vor allem zum Beispiel bei den Humanwissenschaften hat das zu negativen Tendenzen geführt, wie das in meinem Bericht auch detailliert dargestellt wird. Ich komme allmählich zum Schluss. Noch ein wichtiges Thema möchte ich erwähnen, nämlich das Thema der Universitätsrankings. Wir müssen feststellen, dass die Qualität einer Hochschulausbildung nicht immer kongruiert mit den demokratischen Zuständen im betroffenen Land oder bei der betroffenen Hochschulinstitution. Und ich meine, dass wir dann auch darauf Rücksicht nehmen müssen als Europarat, als die Institution, die die Menschenrechte und die demokratischen Grundlagen ja in unseren Mitgliedstaaten bewahren möchte. Ich möchte noch einmal meinen Dank ausdrücken allen Experten, die hier mitgearbeitet haben. Ich möchte ganz besonders den exzellenten empirischen Beitrag von Professor Karam hier erwähnen, was ich Ihnen ans Herz lege. Und ich möchte auch betonen, dass ich selber auch sehr viele Fact-Finding-Missions durchgeführt habe nach Kroatien, nach Rumänien. In Ungarn selber habe ich Gespräche geführt und es tut mir wirklich aufrichtig leid, dass meine genehmigte und geplante Fact-Finding-Mission nach Russland wegen der Pandemie nicht stattfinden konnte. Aber ich meine, dass diejenigen, die diesen gesamten Bericht mitsamt Anhang gelesen haben, haben sich hoffentlich davon überzeugt, dass das ein ausgewogener und dem komplexen Thema gerechter Bericht ist. Ich möchte die sehr verehrten Mitglieder der Ständigen Kommission und meine lieben Kolleginnen und Kollegen darum bitten, dass sie in der Diskussion die erwähnten Staaten nicht verteidigen wollen, weil, wie ich gesagt habe, ich habe nicht einmal einzelne Staaten mit meinen Empfehlungen und Anforderungen dann in meinem Bericht berücksichtigt. Ich meine, es ist wichtig, diesen Spiegel jetzt vor uns zu halten und dieses enorm wichtige Thema für Europa und für die Welt, die akademische Freiheit und die universitäre Autonomie zu unterstützen. Herzlichen Dank für Ihre Aufmerksamkeit.
Danke, Herr Brenner. I understand that Mr. Kislak wishes to raise a point of order. Sergei, you have the floor.
Спасибо, что вы мне дали слово, и я прошу прощения, что вынужден взять его вне очереди, поскольку это касается предыдущего голосования. К сожалению, я нажимал кнопку «Воздержаться», а мой голос был зарегистрирован как поддержка предыдущей резолюции. Я пытался попросить слово в тот момент, к сожалению, меня не заметили, но я благодарен, что мне дали слово сейчас. Видимо, это технический сбой, и поэтому я просил бы зафиксировать наше голосование как воздержавшееся. Большое спасибо, еще раз извините за то, что должен был взять вне очереди слово. Спасибо.
No problem. Let it be noted that Mr. Kislak made his point concerning the former report. Obviously, abstaining doesn't make any difference in terms of the unanimity of the accepted report, if I may say so. Then we come to the political groups in the debate. After the political groups, I will give the floor to the chair of the committee because he has an agenda problem and I think it is important he could address us. But we need to follow the rules. So the first in my list is Stefan Schenach for the Socialist Democrats and Greens. Stefan, you have the floor. Stefan, please come on board. Apparently we have a problem with Stefan Schenach. I will then take now Frédéric Reis. Vous avez la parole. Frédéric Reis, vous avez la parole.
Est-ce que vous m'entendez?
C'est parfait, allez-y.
Très bien, merci Monsieur le Président, chers collègues. C'est avec intérêt que j'ai pris connaissance du rapport de Coleman Brenner ainsi que de ses projets de résolution et de recommandations. Au nom du groupe PPE, je voudrais le féliciter pour cet excellent travail consacré à un sujet primordial pour l'avenir de notre jeunesse. La liberté académique et l'autonomie des universités sont en effet des signes de bonne santé d'une démocratie. Je voudrais remercier le rapporteur d'avoir su adapter son propos en tenant compte des effets de la pandémie du Covid-19, une crise d'une violence inouïe au niveau mondial. C'est là qu'on se rend compte combien il est important que nos chercheurs travaillent ensemble, comme le mentionne le rapport. Je suis entièrement d'accord avec la souplesse d'adaptation nécessaire pour que, par exemple, la recherche fondamentale et la recherche clinique puissent dialoguer en vue d'une meilleure efficacité. D'où l'importance de la coopération et de la transparence soulignée par le rapporteur. L'autonomie des établissements d'enseignement supérieur et leur réactivité ont permis aux enseignants de garder le contact avec les étudiants au plus fort de la crise, surtout avec les plus fragiles ou ceux qui n'avaient pas les moyens de suivre un enseignement en ligne. Le rapporteur a justement insisté sur les relations humaines qui sont irremplaçables dans les cursus d'apprentissage, et tout cela, donc, s'est fait dans le respect des consignes et des contraintes de nos gouvernements respectifs. Le Covid a causé des traumatismes profonds et sans doute faudra-t-il imaginer des dispositifs de résilience pour les jeunes livrés à eux-mêmes, parfois loin de leur famille, parfois dans un autre pays. Aujourd'hui, nous sommes en pleine deuxième vague et elle nous incite à une grande vigilance. J'ai relevé combien notre rapporteur tenait à la liberté d'expression et c'est pourquoi permettez-moi d'avoir ici une pensée émue pour l'enseignant décapité en France alors qu'il faisait un cours sur la liberté d'expression. Les réseaux sociaux qui ont relayé ce crime atroce sont incriminés, mais nous savons tous que sur Internet, le meilleur côtoie le pire. Pour revenir à notre sujet, les établissements doivent pouvoir organiser leur activité de recherche selon une organisation qui leur est propre, ce qui peut parfois s'avérer complexe. Il s'agit là encore de dialoguer, de prendre le meilleur des uns et des autres, et par-delà même de simplifier. Il faut faciliter la coopération entre établissements, mais pas au détriment du principe d'autonomie et de la libre organisation, principe selon lequel la stratégie scientifique des établissements est déterminée par leur conseil et leur gouvernance. Tous les universitaires doivent avoir accès aux meilleures formations permettant de protéger leurs droits en matière de liberté académique. Ils pourront ainsi œuvrer sereinement pour la réussite d'un maximum d'étudiants. Donc vraiment bravo pour ce rapport.
Merci beaucoup. Je reviens maintenant. I now return to the Socialist group, Stefan Schenak. Stefan, you have the floor. Apparently, we have a problem with Stefan. No, here we go. Stefan.
Everything is working. Thank you.
You got the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. First, in German to Mr. Brenner. Ich gratuliere Ihnen sehr für diesen Bericht, Herr Brenner. Ich weiß, dass das ein sehr mutiger Bericht für Sie ist, unter den Umständen, unter denen Sie lehren müssen und Sie leben müssen. Now I come back, maybe in English. If you look into a society, and then there are two twins which tell you what is the level of democratic standards and the democratic society. And these are twins. On one hand is the freedom of media, and the other is the freedom of academic, on the academic freedom and the autonomy of the higher education institutes. And both are very, very important. And this report from Mr. Brenner shows us very, very clear what is the problem, for what we have to take care, and what are the worries. And I know there is one amendment, and I apply now in my speech not vote in favor, because Mr. Brenner named 4 countries in this report which are by the Academic Freedom Index on a very low level, and we should not delete their names. Also the COVID time showed us how important it is to go on with the freedom of academic teaching. And also I share also the concerns from Mr. Brenner about external funding and accommodation. This makes the freedom of academic very small, and he implies that the academic freedom is also a fact of support by the public and also for the public responsibility. Maybe Mr. Brenner comes from a country where a whole university, the teachers, the students, the staff are now refugees. The Central European University came in totally to Vienna because it was not anymore possible to offer that. And I know some of employees from Council of Europe which goes through this fantastic university. And I'm very, very sorry that the climate of freedom of academic support in Hungary is so little that the whole university is now a refugee.
Time.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Stefan. I've been now informed that you do not hear my bell for the 3 minutes down here, so I will go, I don't know what, ding ding or something at 3 minutes. We now go to ALDE, Ms. Fiona O'Loughlin. You have the floor. Not connected. I do not see Fiona. Okay. Okay, then I'll go to the next one, which is European Conservatives. John Howell, are you on board? Yes. John, you have the floor.
Thank you, President. I too would like to congratulate the rapporteur on his report. I think we are all in favour of academic freedom, and I say that as somebody who was in a former existence a research fellow within a university. So I've experienced this from both sides. There are 2 points that I would like to make. The first one relates to the arguments against commercialization, and I would just put down a marker on this. That yes, I accept that commercialization can have a bad effect on universities, but just look at the research that is taking place on a vaccine for COVID. And the extent to which that is linking together commercial companies and universities. In a university near to where I live, at the University of Oxford, they are working with AstraZeneca to produce a vaccine for COVID, and that is showing the best of what commercial inputs can do. The second point I'd like to make is one relating to anti-Semitism, because universities have to show themselves worthy of academic freedom. And we have seen universities in my own country and across Europe who do not really support the idea of taking a stand against those who are trying to silence discussion of the Holocaust, or allowing people with a Jewish faith to say what they want to say, and we've seen many students' organisations stopped from speaking in that situation, which I think is quite scandalous. Now, I do also accept that universities are in a bit of a cleft stick on this. In my own country, there is one university named after a medieval knight, Simon de Montfort, and the university is being asked to change its name because, as was typical at the time, he persecuted some Jewish people. So you can't have it both ways. You are trapped between these two extremes. But it is absolutely crucial to allow students to, as in their freedom of expression, to have Jewish groups and to take those arguments forward. Thank you.
Thank you, John. We now come to the United Left, Mr. Yishar Özre. You have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. And I would like to first congratulate Mr. Brenner for this very timely and much needed and wonderful report and resolution. I myself was an academic before I joined formal politics, so that's why I very carefully read every single sentence a couple of times. It seems that the report does have two main arguments. On the one hand, it is the argument about the commercialization of academic institutions, a process whereby knowledge becomes a commodity. Like by commodity, I mean like something like say Kentucky Fried Chicken or a McDonald's burger or a smartphone, right? It is something that you buy, you sell and buy in the market. I mean, it may not sound that bad when you say this, but when you think of that every passing day, fewer and fewer people have access to quality higher education. This is, in fact, a very, very big problem because now universities applying business model, they are functioning like companies. Students are customers or consumers. Knowledge itself is a commodity, and academics are more like salespersons. In fact, I mean, I was in academia between 2002 and 2015. Over those 12, 13 years, I personally have felt that I was no longer an academic, actually, because we were forced to sell courses mainly. So this is, of course, undermining the institutional autonomy of higher education, because the idea here is not some public good, it is profit maximization. That is why the market does business, right? It is producing and selling knowledge as a privatized commodity in order to maximize profits. And the second big problem is that authoritarian states and governments are more and more undermining institutions of higher education. And I totally share the argument of Mr. Stefan Shanak, who said that authoritarian governments, they target the media and the academia. Why? Because they are scared of critical inquiry, I should say. For them, for both the market and the states, what is important is not critical thinking, it is useful knowledge. By useful, I mean for the markets, what is useful? Anything that would help you make more money. And for the authoritarian states, what is useful? It is anything that would help you maintain your political rule. So I won't go into the case of Turkey, which is my country. I mean, the situation is quite bad there. There is also a kind of appendix at the end of the report. So, but let me finally raise this issue. We truly need a very specific Council of Europe Convention on Academic Freedom, or alternatively, as suggested by Mr. Brenner, an additional protocol on academic freedom to the European Convention on Human Rights. And it is not just to draft a resolution, a convention, but we need also to install a very powerful monitoring and enforcement mechanism in order to assure that the convention is implemented by member states. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. We now go after the representatives to the speakers who have inscribed. As first, I will take, je vais prendre Olivier Berthe comme premier, qui s'est inscrit. Olivier, vous avez la parole. J'espère que vous pouvez rester à bord pour les amendements oraux, parce que sinon, on aura des problèmes. Olivier, vous avez la parole.
Oui, merci. Merci beaucoup. Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président. Je ne sais pas si vous m'entendez.
C'est parfait, allez-y.
Bien, merci. Alors, il n'y a pas d'amendement personnel en ce qui me concerne pour la commission. Je voulais simplement dire au nom de la commission que d'abord, je voulais féliciter monsieur Brenner pour son rapport, dire qu'il lançait un signal d'alerte retentissant à tous ceux d'entre nous qui ont tendance à considérer la liberté académique comme un droit de seconde zone pour les enseignants et les universitaires. Or, ce n'est pas un droit mineur, mais c'est au contraire l'un des piliers de nos sociétés démocratiques et même un facteur de développement durable. C'est pour ça que notre commission a voulu souligner d'entrée dans le projet de résolution qui nous est soumis pour adoption aujourd'hui. Le message qu'on doit envoyer aux législateurs et au gouvernement doit être sans ambiguïté. Nous devons protéger la liberté académique et l'autonomie institutionnelle par le biais de la législation, des réglementations, de nos pratiques administratives nationales. On doit construire également le cadre qui rend effective la liberté académique et l'autonomie institutionnelle. Voilà. À cet égard, évidemment, l'argent est un facteur déterminant de l'efficacité de toutes nos politiques nationales clés. Malheureusement, en ce qui concerne l'enseignement supérieur, le financement reste une pierre d'achoppement. Je voulais également dire que M. Brenner a eu le courage de citer un certain nombre d'États dans lesquels la liberté académique semble menacée et il a eu l'audace également d'inclure son propre pays dans cette liste. Et donc, je souhaiterais que dans la tradition qui est la nôtre aujourd'hui, nous puissions accepter chacune et chacun de faire un pas, de faire un geste pour accepter ces critiques et faire en sorte que l'on puisse améliorer globalement les libertés académiques et l'autonomie des établissements d'enseignement supérieur en Europe. Voilà, je vous remercie.
Merci Olivier. Est-ce que je peux vous demander de formellement avancer les amendements oraux que vous m'avez envoyés?
Alors, je ne les ai pas sous les yeux. J'en suis désolé parce que je suis également dans une réunion avec le Premier ministre français sur la crise Covid. Donc, je ne peux malheureusement pas vous les donner. Je ne les ai pas sous les yeux. Voilà, mais ils vous ont été transmis et j'invite la commission à les voter.
Alors, je voudrais tout simplement demander de tout simplement dire que vous avancez formellement les 3 amendements que vous m'avez communiqués. Ça suffira pour le protocole.
J'avance formellement les 3 amendements que je vous ai transmis. Voilà, et j'invite l'Assemblée à les voter et l'Assemblée à voter également l'excellent rapport de M. Brenner.
Alors, je te demande d'avancer chez ton Premier ministre, de lui dire, écoutez, que tous les membres de l'Assemblée puissent venir à Strasbourg en janvier. Voilà.
Je lui dirai. Merci.
Allez,
merci, Eric.
Toutes les salutations au Premier ministre. Merci.
Merci.
So now we go to the next speaker on my list. Epicin, you have the floor. I do apologize. Sometimes I have like only parts of the names, but you have the floor.
Уважаемые коллеги, следует отметить, что определение академической свободы принято министрами высшего образования буквально вчера. Вместе с тем, в докладе венгерского коллеги приводятся сравнительные оценки положения дел в этой сфере в Европе. Несмотря на то, что докладчик просил не обсуждать страны, тем более непонятно, почему в группу отстающих занесены именно Азербайджан, Венгрия, Турция и Россия, если только что принятое определение академической свободы еще не имеет правоприменительной практики. Кроме того, существующий на данный момент расчет индекса академической свободы, на котором построен доклад, не доказал свою авторитетность и не может претендовать на использование в качестве одного из международных механизмов мониторинга академической свободы. В оценке докладчиком ситуации с академической свободой в странах Совета Европы прослеживается явная непоследовательность и двойные стандарты. Так, в пункте 6 проекта резолюции отмечается, что университеты играют важную роль в сохранении культурного и языкового наследия. В пояснительном меморандуме приводится негативный пример Румынии в связи с ущемлением там прав венгерского меньшинства на получение высшего образования на родном языке. При этом коллега из Венгрии ни словом не обмолвился о вопиющих нарушениях образовательных и языковых прав русского и русскоязычного населения Украины и Прибалтики. Также считаем неприемлемым использование в докладе конфронтационного языка в отношении ситуации на Украине, на Южном Кавказе, в том числе и политизированных формулировок. Спасибо за внимание, коллеги.
Thank you very much. I now go to the next on my list, Mrs. Juhas from Hungary. Mrs. Juhas, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Fundamental rights in the field of education and science enjoy constitutional level protection in Hungary. Protecting and preserving academic freedom and institutional autonomy are essential and core values for the Hungarian government. Firstly, I would like to propound the issue that it is typical in the practice of the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe that the rapporteur analyze its own country within the country examples, which raise the issue of lack of neutrality in this part of the report. In my opinion, it is against the code of the conduct of rapporteurs of the Parliamentary Assembly. According to the rules of the conduct of rapporteurs, Article 1.14 contains that undertaking to refrain from any act which may cast doubt on their neutrality, which raising the issue of breaching of the rules. Mr. Brenner is in the Jobbik, which is an opposition party in Hungary. So in order to be able to avoid the violation of code of conduct of rapporteurs of the Parliamentary Assembly, I suggest to delete the whole chapter on Hungary, Appendix Point 1 of the report. Secondly, the National Higher Education Act of Hungary contains detailed provisions for foreign education institutions who wish to comply within and operate in Hungary. Its revision was based on the finding of the Education Authority in the course of the detailed inspection that revealed several irregularities. As a result, that the legislator decided to amend the law. The amendment intended to ensure that only high-quality foreign universities function in Hungary. The modified act required that the operation of a foreign university shall be based on an international treaty between the host country and the country of origin, as well as the institution must also genuinely offer higher education in the country concerned. Currently, there are 16 foreign institutions operating in Hungary with headquarters abroad. The criteria was not impossible to meet. For example, China, Thailand, Malaysia treated the amendment as a technical issue, and the institutions did not disapprove of the new regulations either. Consequently, no foreign institutions can be granted exclusive status, otherwise Hungary would be in a violation of Article 14 of the European Convention. Finally, it shall be acknowledged that the rapporteur has raised the important issue of the Medical and Pharmaceutical University of Marosvásárhely. Romania, namely, deliberately ignored its legal liability stemming directly from the Romanian law. So in this section, we will fully support the relating finding of the report. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much, Madam Juhas. Concerning your remark as to the deleting of part of the report, that is just not possible because then we should have had an amendment which is not in place. And concerning the neutrality of the rapporteur as such, I mean, these remarks might have been made in the committee, but as I have now been informed, these were not made. But on the other hand, obviously, your remarks will be in the report on concerning this report that we are now treating.
You're right. Okay.
Thank you. We will now come to Mr. Yildiz from Turkey. Mr. Yildiz, you have the floor. Okay, we lost Mr. Yildiz. I hope he will come back. Then we now have Mr. Muñana. Mr. Muñana, you have the floor.
Very good afternoon, Mr. President. Thank you very much for the floor, dear colleagues. I would like to congratulate Mr. Brenner for the important report that he has put forward. Me being an academician for 27 years, I've had the experience actually to talk about what academic freedom is all about. And the report is indeed timely. And I would like just to point out 5 important issues of academic freedom that we need to abide with. First and foremost, it means that political, regional, and philosophical beliefs of politicians, administrators, and members of the public cannot be imposed on the students or faculty of universities. Secondly, academic freedom gives faculty members and students the right to challenge one another's views, but not to penalize them for holding them. Third, academic freedom establishes a faculty member's right to remain true to his or her pedagogical philosophy and intellectual commitments. It preserves the intellectual integrity of educational system and thus public good. Fourth, academic freedom is also very important in teaching, means that both faculty members and students can make comparisons and contrasts between subjects taught in course and any field of human knowledge or period of history. And fifth, academic freedom gives faculty members and students the right to seek redress or request a hearing if they believe their rights have been violated. Without these, it leads to demonstrations in universities through actually students and as well as academicians. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. I still have on my list now Madame Yuparieva. You have the floor.
Mr. President, I would like to respond to one remark of Russian colleague. He mentioned in his talk that also Baltic countries have some problems with academic freedom, and I would like to say that he is wrongly informed, and Estonia do not have problems with academic freedom and autonomy. So this is a very important remark from my point. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I have no requests left on my list. Therefore, I now call Mr. Brenner to respond. Mr. Brenner, Rapporteur, you have the floor. You need to request the floor, please, Mr. Brenner. You have the floor.
Ich möchte mich sehr bedanken bei allen Kolleginnen und Kollegen, die
excuse me to interrupt. You need to switch on your laptop to floor because you were on translation somewhere. Left floor, please.
Sorry.
No problem. You have the floor.
Noch einmal, Herr Präsident, liebe Kolleginnen und Kollegen, ich möchte mich erstens bedanken für alle sehr lobenden Worte und Bemerkungen von Ihnen. Ich möchte ganz kurz reagieren, einerseits auf Herrn Hauel über die Kommerzialisierung der Forschung, nämlich Sie haben sehr richtig gesagt, dass zum Beispiel in der Forschung bezüglich jetzt in der Pandemiezeiten bei dem Impfstoff gegen Corona natürlich eine angewandte Forschung dann zusammen mit wirtschaftlichen Interessen und wirtschaftlich fundierten Firmen dann geschieht. Das ist richtig so. Allerdings, was die Grundlagenforschung anbelangt, und die Grundlagenforschung ist besonders wichtig, weil wir können häufig nicht wissen, welche Erkenntnisse einer Grundlagenforschung für später dann auch für kommerzielle Zwecke benutzt werden können. Ich möchte dann einfach als Reaktion dafür geben, dass ja, Sie haben recht, aber die Grundlagenforschung ist genauso wichtig. Unseren türkischen Freunden möchte ich sagen, dass ja, auch sozial schwache Schichten müssen einen Zugang haben zum Hochschulwesen. Ich pflichte Ihnen bei und zuletzt möchte ich mich dann noch einmal bei allen bedanken, die bei diesem Bericht mitgewirkt haben, allen Experten und vor allem Frau Odratz vom Sekretariat und alle Mitarbeiterinnen und Mitarbeiter, die mich dabei unterstützt haben. Dankeschön.
Thank you, Mr. Rapporteur. The Chairman of the Committee on Culture has already spoken at the beginning. As we all have seen, he is now, unfortunately for us, in a meeting. He has formally forwarded 3 oral amendments. I will come to that when we deal with the relevant paragraphs. The debate is closed, and we will now head into the votes. We are in the votes on the amendments to the draft resolution. The document that you have in your files is document 15167. The Committee on Culture, Science, Education and Media has presented a draft resolution to which 1 written amendment has been tabled. But I first go to the oral amendment that has been one of the oral amendments that has been forwarded formally by Mr. Becht. It is an oral amendment to paragraph 4, which reads as follows. In the draft resolution, paragraph 4, replace the last sentence by the following sentence. It therefore welcomes the adoption by the Rome Conference of Ministers of the European Higher Education Area, EHEA, of November 19, 2020, of a common definition of academic freedom and encourages the further devising of appropriate benchmarks that would enable systemic monitoring and assessment. In my opinion, the oral amendment is in order. Mr. Becht already formally forwarded it. Does anyone wish to speak against the oral amendment? I do not see anyone. Then I will put the oral amendment to the vote. Is the vote enabled? The vote is open. Please vote. Oh, I got someone. Fifty-one 15 seconds. It's getting late here. Okay, vote closed. May I have the results, Wojciech?
The results is the following. 18 members voted in favor of this oral amendment, 1 member against, 3 abstentions.
Okay, thank you very much. Then now we move, the amendment is adopted. We come to amendment number 1. I remind you that speeches on amendments are limited to 1 minute. Who would like to support amendment number 1? I've been informed, Mr. Kislyak, that you would do so. You have the floor, Mr. Kislyak.
Спасибо, господин председатель. Я постараюсь быть кратким, поскольку мой коллега господин Епишин уже изложил наши взгляды относительно доклада и изложил довольно точно. Но говоря о поправке, которую я хотел представить, я бы хотел подчеркнуть, что сам автор, господин Бреннан, говорил, что пытался сделать доклад объективным, нейтральным. Однако по отношению, по крайней мере, к моей стране и ряду других, он политически, по крайней мере, небрежен. И потому малоприемлем. Но сейчас я хочу сконцентрироваться на пункте 10 проекта резолюции, где перечислены страны, якобы занимающие самые низкие позиции в том, что касается определения академической свободы. Так вот, определение академической свободы насчитывает в жизнь всего 24 часа. И поэтому никак не могло быть основой для анализа, который заложен в этом докладе. Мы только что с вами одобрили положение о том, что мы приветствуем эту формулировку. Но получается так, что в докладе мы приветствуем формулировку, которая не могла быть частью оценок, которые положены в основу этого материала. Поэтому мы предлагаем снять слова правительства Азербайджана, Венгрии, Российской Федерации и Турции, занимающие самые низкие позиции в AFI, и сменить их словами «государства-члены». И последнее. Почему государства-члены? Потому что обеспечение академической свободы – это задача не только для правительств, но и для парламентов, которые определяют законодательную основу для действия университета. Спасибо.
Thank you. Now I ask anyone against colleagues who are asking for the floor and who wish to speak in favor are not in order. So is there anyone who wishes to speak against? I see Mr. Schenach. Mr. Yildiz, I suppose that you are in favor, so I will give the floor to Mr. Schenach.
I said in my speech for our group, I'm absolutely against to delete this paragraph or change into member states. The so-called Academic Freedom Index, Council of Europe, has those 4 countries on the end of the list, and we should make a clear statement. It helps also maybe the states. And what the lady from Hungary said, that was, by the way, not correct. Otherwise, not a whole university has to leave a country when there is so much freedom. So it's right that also Hungary is one of those 4 countries which are on the end of the Academic Freedom Index. And please ask, don't vote in favor.
Thank you very much. Since the committee was not able to consider the amendment, I invite the rapporteur to give his opinion. Mr. Brenner, I count on you having a neutral opinion, given the remarks of your colleague. Mr. Brenner.
Dankeschön, Herr Präsident. Ich möchte betonen, es ist absolut meine neutrale Meinung und vor allem in Zeiten wie diese, wo auch andere Hochschulinstitutionen in Ungarn ja gewissen Gefahren ausgesetzt sind, wie zum Beispiel die Universität für Theater- und Filmkunst, ist meiner Meinung nach mein Bericht ausgesprochen objektiv und zurückhaltend. Ich bin gegen diesen Änderungsantrag, da ich schon betont habe, dass in meinem Bericht keine Empfehlungen an einzelne Mitgliedstaaten ja ausgesprochen werden und als Grundlage von der Nennung der 4 Länder eben eine empirische und Forschung vorliegt. Aus diesen Gründen möchte ich die sehr geehrten Kolleginnen und Kollegen darum bitten, diesem Änderungsantrag nicht zuzustimmen. Dankeschön.
Thank you very much. We will now come to the vote on the amendment. Is the vote enabled? Yes. Please vote. Fifteen seconds. Vote closed. Mr. Wojciech, if you will please give us the result.
Mr. President, 5 members voted in favor of the amendment, 18 against, 3 abstentions.
Therefore, the amendment has not been carried. I understand Mr. Becht formally proposed a second oral amendment to paragraph 12, which reads as follows: in the draft resolution, delete subparagraph 12.1. In my opinion, the oral amendment is in order. Mr. Becht already forwarded it. Does anyone wish to speak against the amendment? This is not the case. Then I now put the oral amendment to the vote. Is the vote enabled? 1 second, colleagues. Okay, the vote is enabled. Please vote. Fifteen seconds, please vote. Vote cast, closed. Wojciech, what is the result?
Mr. President, 15 members voted in favor of oral amendment, 3 against, and 5 abstentions.
Therefore, the oral amendment is carried. We now vote on the draft resolution. We shall hence proceed to vote on the draft resolution as amended, contained in document 15167. I recall that to be adopted, a simple majority is required. The vote is open, enabled. Just a second. Okay. I've got a technician to my far left, and he goes, we've got this signaling. Okay, the vote is enabled. Yeah, please vote. Vote closed. Can I have the result, Wojciech?
"25 members voted in favor of the resolution, 3 against, no abstention."
Therefore, the resolution is carried. Now we come to the vote on the draft recommendation. The Committee on Culture, Science, Education and Media has presented a draft recommendation to which no written amendments have been tabled. Mr. Becht has told us and formally forwarded an oral amendment to subparagraph 5.1. The amendment reads as follows. In the draft recommendation, subparagraph 5.1, replace the words to be by as, with one s, and the words in November by on November 19. So the amended sentence would read 5.1, adhere to the use of the definition of academic freedom as adopted by the Ministers of the European Higher Education Area, EHEA, on November 19, 2020. In my opinion, the oral amendment is in order. Mr. Becht already formally forwarded it. Does anyone wish to speak against the amendment? Which is technical by nature, I would say. No, this is not the case. And I'm looking to our technician to my left side. No signaling. So, okay, there he goes. The vote is open. Vote is closed. Can I have the result?
23 members voted in favor of oral amendment, no against, 1 abstention.
Therefore, the oral amendment is carried. And then we can now proceed to vote on the draft recommendation as amended. It is contained in document 15167. I recall to be adopted, a 2/3 majority is required. I'm looking to my left. Is the vote enabled? Yes, the vote is open. Vote is closed. Wojciech, can I have the result?
Mr. President, 25 members voted in favor of the recommendation, 2 members against, and 1 abstention.
So I reckon that this is a 2/3 majority. It is. So then the recommendation is adopted. Congratulations to the rapporteur and the committee, and the recommendation will be forwarded as is supposed to be done to the Committee of Ministers. Dear colleagues, we have on our agenda now 4 more reports, 2 from the Social Affairs, Health and Sustainable Development Committee, 2 from the Migration, Refugees and Displaced Persons. We got about 12 minutes before 6 o'clock, which is the limit of our meeting today. I don't suppose we can get all 4 of them, not even 1 done. I do apologize for that. On the other hand, we did a lot of work today. I thank you for that. We will have to postpone these reports to a next meeting. I will consult the Presidential Committee in order to see whether we can still in December have an additional Comité Permanent, standing committee, in order to have this work done, because there's so much work in these reports and so much good work that I do believe that we should, in a diligent way, try to forward them and have them decided on. So, just for your information, it might be that still in December, where we do have a bureau, it might be that I convoke a new standing committee in order to at least have these 4 reports done, and who knows, maybe some other issues too. Voila, next meeting to be confirmed. I wish to thank every one of you to be on board. We had an important decision being taken today. Thank you for that. And I hope to see you all soon, maybe in the next standing committee or bureau. And definitely so, since we now have got the accord or the agreement of the French Prime Minister in real time. So all of you who are able to come out to Strasbourg in January, you are very much welcome. See you soon. Stay safe.